This fucking heat wave.
Dude, I'm sick of it. I'm over it. You know what I mean?
So what?
The heat wave.
The heat wave.
Oh, the heat
Yeah.
wave? Yeah,
Yeah.
that should be over.
It's pretty bad.
Yep. All right, it's going now.
So we're going?
Yeah, it's
Very
going.
cool.
All right.
We're all started.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a guest on today. His name is Derek. Pretty excited to bring on this guest. He has a lot of knowledge here.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to be just covering a brief portion of it here. So hello, how you doing today?
Good. How you guys doing?
Good.
Doing all right.
Had a good
Yeah.
day.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely glad to have you.
Yeah,
This is going to be
really
good. I'm
excited.
excited.
Appreciate
Yeah.
it. Glad to help out.
Awesome.
Cool.
What you guys got going on here?
Well, Zoop had mentioned that you had some things you wanted to talk about and discuss. Some interesting topics.
Well, I heard you guys are all interested in the Sumerian one, right?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
History
Sumerian's
and
very
stuff.
interesting. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's really, a lot of fascinating stories that, do culminate and have a little bit of truth to them. I do recommend, though, to, start your journey with reading something that's a little bit more close to home, which would be the Bible.
Definitely.
A lot of
Definitely.
people don't want you to read this book, but I would say the Old Testament is a truncated or like what's that, the Cliff Notes version of the Sumerian record.
Yeah. That.
Where it was just, obviously it was edited and, the people who were in charge of the knowledge throughout those, Western advancement in history only kind of peppered to the peasants what they needed them to know to control them or to get them inspired or to use that psychological, trauma really that we all suffer due to the, I guess what we'd call a cosmic abandonment in a sense. That's kind of what we've been dealing with as a species, and that's what the Sumerian record kind of outlines really.
Sure.
That we pretty much were made to do a specific task, and then once that task was completed, they kind of ran out of reasons to keep us around.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
So,
how familiar are you guys with any of it? Anybody know about
a
it?
little bit. We know a little bit about it.
I know a little bit of information. Where does it come from?
Why
Where
don't
do we
you go
find
into
it?
the origin of the Sumerian record a little bit?
Well, it's like you said, it's like we all are familiar with like Raiders of the Lost Ark
Yeah.
Yeah.
and those stories. These guys were kind of giving us a little bit of insight to what they knew and learned because all these guys were college, filmmakers when the Sumerian record was discovered
Where was it discovered at?
in Germany.
Germany,
Well,
yeah.
it was originally like in Raiders of the Lost Ark described, that Nazis went all over the world during that time trying to find these ancient relics and artifacts because they felt that they had untapped power or researched or unknown power that could be researched and figured out and could be used, obviously, to take over the world. Great power to give them the advantage over the allies and anybody opposing their, world domination, which seems to be the theme.
Yeah, Nazis were into that a lot and all of the cult stuff. That's
Oh, big
Oh,
time.
yeah.
a huge section.
Oh, big time. They were all about that. And, the Aryan connection, which a lot of people are very confused of what that's all about. It's been, again, demonized into something when the original concept of Aryan meant someone who was wise and respected nature, kind of like a druid. That's why you have, like, certain countries that still kind of carry on that legacy, like Bulgaria. You have Arya in the name itself, which is Aryan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you get, like aristocrat. Ari is the, preface for that. All this goes way back to Sumerian, the Babylon, and these cultures that have been forgotten and lost and, destroyed through time since those periods because, the legacy shows this. But anyways, these filmmakers during the 60s when it was discovered because, the Nazis raided everything, found all these dowels and stone records, which were all done on these kind of cylindrical things that you could roll out. They carved it on it. So it really was hard to argue pictures and, very clear illustrations of what they were trying to communicate. But they had thousands of these things, along with other cuneiform tablets and whatnot. They kept really amazing records, extremely administrative people. The Shumers or the Sumerians is what they really were said it back in those days. But anyways, Yeah, back in the 60s, the Nazis had buried or had a big vault that they put all this stuff in when they had confiscated across the world. And in World War II, the Allies, we bombed Berlin and buried these things, just literally lost in time, lost forever. I mean, they tried to find a lot of art stuff and a lot of relics, and they did a whole campaign that was made a movie about it and all that. But stuff gets lost. War, especially when you're dropping, hundreds of thousands of bombs on a city, and it's just day in and day out. You're gonna lose some things.
Yeah,
Exactly.
So they did.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was like 20 years later, 20-something years later, civilians, thankfully, were the part of the project, because if anybody else had found it, we would have never heard about it. But civilians discovered it, so that's how it got into the mainstream news. Is they reported it. They called in civilians. They didn't call in the military. They didn't call in anybody else. They called in other civilians, and then it got known, and it wasn't covered up or destroyed or sent away like in the end of Raiders Lost Ark in that warehouse full of boxes that
top
Exactly.
men.
Yeah, never.
So the physical record, the Sumerian record, what had happened to it? Because from my understanding, it was just lost, or was it destroyed?
Well, they found it.
Oh, they found it.
That was the point. Is
In the
that
Germany.
it had been
Yeah.
lost after World War II.
Yeah.
So, and we didn't even know anything about it
Yeah.
as far as civilians were concerned. They didn't even teach in colleges or what college that they allowed us to go to at the time. But it wasn't. It's very, very little taught today in schools. It's because it goes against the Darwinian theory and the Darwinian programming of history that we came from cavemen, around the flood, and then all of a sudden, the Egyptian, growth period of Old, Middle, and New Kingdom and all that, and it fits their model of evolution, but Sumer doesn't. It kind of screws up their whole plan, because it's like all of a sudden right after the flood, you have this high society where they had everything. They had top medical understanding, top legal understanding. They had laws were very, very intricate and understood. I mean, far more intricate than the Romans and other people that came later. They'd already dealing with divorce. They were already dealing with things in society that were very complex, and at all different levels, from agriculture to you name it. And it was flood, and then if you saw it on a graph, huge spike to high society, and then all of a sudden a huge drop. And then we started this little creep up through the Egyptian and later the Greeks and whatnot. But
Sure.
and when you read the Bible, that's what's important, because the Bible has a lot of clues. That's why when you go to church and whatnot, they only teach, they only keep doing the same sermons over and over again, the feel-good sermons, the ones that give you hope, or to deal with the day-to-day stuff. Job, even Job has a lot of clues in it they don't really go into. But anyways, it's really important to read, because once you read that, you kind of get an idea of what the communication is what they're trying to convey. Because one thing that I've noticed when I read the Old Testament is there was definitely a polarity in the interactive God that they were dealing with in the Old Testament. In the entire first 4 or 5 books, and Exodus, or not Exodus, but Genesis all the way up to Deuteronomy and whatnot.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, there was a polarity in the God, and each time the God showed up, it had a different attitude. He either hated human beings, talked down to them, thought they were the stupidest thing, we could not follow these basic rules, and blah 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 blah. And then all of a sudden you'd have this benevolent God that was very loving and caring and nurturing and giving help and giving aid and offering assistance. So you have this complex story that's definitely filled with these polarizing deity that these people are dealing with, and it causes a lot of confusion when you're reading it, because you don't understand. And that's another question you hear in church, is like, how can this God be so hateful and angry towards his people that he's supposed to love, and then the next minute he does? Well, when you start reading the Sumerian record, apparently the gods, again from the Greek, God is a little g. It's not the God, because even the Sumerian gods of the little g recognized there was a greater God above them.
No.
There was an unseen energy in the universe that they had to all abide by, or were bounded by. They recognized that. These gods that the Sumerians spoke of, which were, the visitors who came here long ago. And there's a lot of people who refute it. There's a lot of people who've argued over like the time period and how long it was. I mean, Sitchin, could have been a spy. He could have been a CIA agent. He could have been disinformationing. Who knows? But there's also corroborating evidence in other areas. That's the key too, is corroboration. That's why it's good to read other things. Start with the Bible and then go like here's the key too. Look, if you look at Raiders of the Lost Ark, he's telling you a story. He starts with the quest for the Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark of the Covenant, according to the Bible, is a contract between God and Abraham, right? He would make him great, and if he worshipped him, all his people after him would be great.
Yep.
Okay? So, anyways, first thing that Indy does when he's on the quest to find the Ark of the Covenant, he doesn't go to ancient, Babylon. He doesn't go to Sumer. He doesn't go to Egypt. The first place he goes is Nepal to find the key.
Yeah.
The key is in Nepal. He's trying to tell you a story. He's trying to tell you something about the history. Because, according to the Sumerian record, that's where the first landing occurred, was in Nepal. Was up in that high mountaintop. And that was where they surveyed and figured out the best place to create their landing strip in civilization, because the entire Mesopotamia, according to the Sumerian record, these gods that came here for gold. That's why gold has been such a mythological quested item that has no intrinsic value to a Stone Age caveman.
Exactly. I always thought
why would it be so important?
Exactly. Why is gold so important?
Shiny
Thought
objects?
To be shiny.
There's a lot of shiny objects.
Exactly.
A lot of shiny
Tin is
objects
shiny.
out there that are beautiful and nice and sparkly. And,
Yeah.
But why is gold such a valued commodity? And then around that you have all the mythology, which is who hoarded gold in mythology.
King Midas.
Well, he turned stuff
things into gold.
Yeah.
Okay, but what kind of thing hoarded gold throughout history?
Royalty, pharaohs, kings.
What kind of creature?
Dragons.
Dragons.
Oh, dragons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Why would dragons always want gold so badly? Because a part of the myth and lore is that these were, again, scaly serpentine, or like in the stories of Dagon in Africa. Dagon was a fish god. That's why the Pope wears the fish mitre hat. It's the Dagon hat. You can actually see the fish shape. And he wears the cloak that looks like a fish. You see fish symbology all through the Vatican, but it all comes from Dagon, because Dagon came out of the ocean. And again, that's another connection to Enki, because Enki was the water bearer.
Yep.
He was the one of the brothers that the Sumerian record talks about, the two brothers, the two gods, that one hated humans and one loved humans, right? And there's a history behind that, because of course, according to the Sumerian record, we were all created to do one thing, and that was to mine this gold. Because apparently, according to the Sumerian record, there was a obviously drama within their own universal galactic realm, and they had their father, who was Anu, and Anu had just got rid of a tyrant who was, the emperor preceding him. He usurped him, but he didn't. When he was usurped, he actually challenged him and beat him. So it was like an honorable thing. And I can't remember the guy, the original emperor's name right now, but he fled out of the solar system to escape with his life, because he had been dishonored. He had lost the throne, and he had lost it, fair and square.
Yeah.
So he was really not in a position to leverage anything or leverage his throne anymore. We've all seen Game of Thrones. We all know how these people think when you get that kind of power. And on a galactic or a universal level, think about it. These people were probably just maniacal with bloodthirsty power. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
oh my god, you can imagine how
frothing.
the ego.
Oh, yeah.
You can imagine how the ego would be. But
Exactly.
anyways, so this guy's barreling across the universe to escape persecution and just a lynch mob after him, in their sense. But he comes across this little remote hick universe or solar system called galaxy, or what is it, the Milky Way. And then he finds a even more remote backwater pond solar system, which is ours, to hide, to get away, so that they'll forget about him and stop looking for him, and they won't worry about it anymore. But when he gets here, he realizes, oh, looky here. This planet Earth is abundant with gold, which is the prime resource my planet needs to survive. And now I just got the gold key to get back in with the guys back home,
Yep.
so they won't hate me so
And
much.
why do they need gold to survive?
Yeah, what's so key about gold?
Well, apparently they're on such a large elliptis. They're apparently a part of our solar system, and their elliptis is so big that it takes them many. This is again a lot of speculation.
Yeah,
because we really don't
hypothetical.
know. That it takes about 13. Some say 1,300 years. Some say 2,600 years. Some say 3,300 years. I've heard different people make estimates on its cycle, and apparently we are a binary star system. We've been taught that we only have one sun, but we would be a kind of a weird or an anomaly in the universe if we were the only ones that didn't, because every other solar system that exists that we've seen is a binary system. So Sirius is probably, according to the Egyptians and the Sumerians too, that's that binary star, and it's just on a 26,000 year cycle, and it's the furthest away from us at this point. It's 12,000 years away from us. So it's a part of that elliptis as well. So for instance, when the suns start to get closer together, it's a golden age because everything's lit up. There's constant light, no dark. And that's what's, again, movies like Star Wars is showing you in the beginning is the two suns that Luke is looking at when he's in Tatooine.
Yeah.
So he's telling you that was probably Earth or this system a long time ago when the two suns were closer together.
Yeah. Well, that's what it says in the beginning of the film.
Right.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
Right. So, getting back to your question, is that since they're on this huge elliptis, they've been able to get further away from the sun and survive without the sun using a gold atmosphere. And
Okay.
science today even talks about this, that we could actually do that, inject gold particulates. Who knows all this weather shit they're doing, and that's we do the same thing.
HARP.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, who knows if it could be like the beginnings of that, or that technology being given to us to prevent it. Who knows? I mean, it's hard to tell whose side everybody's on, but
Yeah.
because they don't tell you enough, and you could be looking at something and go, God, that looks horrible what they're doing, and then you find out actually they know 200 years predictive of what's going to happen, and we need to get on the path. You never know.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it is harming people what they're doing now, and there is some fishiness to it, but. Anyways, the point is a gold atmosphere apparently allows you to stay warm and live off of very little ultraviolet light from the sun
Okay. Interesting.
and survive.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's modern science even talks about this being a possibility, a reality.
Okay.
So when you have modern science, again, talking about stuff that these people were talking about a long time ago.
Supposedly ancient history.
Cavemen knew about microbial gold atmospheres and whatnot. And we're talking about it in their context of these gods,
Yeah.
and why they came here to mine the gold that was so important for their own planet's survivability, because their gold was deteriorating, their atmosphere was breaking down, and that's a part of the reason why they were having this huge feud, is because this guy wasn't getting the job done. So people, in chaos, we're all gonna die. Get someone else to lead. This guy's leading us to our doom.
Yep.
So that's why the change of guard took place, and Anu, and that's why we get Anunnaki, because Anu is means the people of Anu, or the Anunnaki are the people of Anu, which is his empire now. Who knows how big that is, or whatever it is. It's hard to tell with their technology, because you hear you read stuff and it indicates possibly they have technology to do greater movement through the universe, and then some says no, that they have to leapfrog when they get close to proximity.
Well, my question is, it sounds to me like they're not even still around anymore. It sounds to me like
I don't know, they might be, man.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like they could be around right now. They could be behind this whole thing happening with the with the inoculations, because you gotta realize it's still in the wording today. Enoch.
Yeah.
Enoch.
Yeah.
Inoculation.
Yeah,
That
that's
comes
true.
from the word
I've
Enoch.
heard that before. It's
And
definitely
Enoch,
true.
the story of Enoch, which is one of the books in the Bible they took out because it talked too much about going up and hanging out with these gods and what the gods were all about. And the gods obviously treat us like we are a farm. And according to, again, the Sumerian record, or what he's able to decipher, the reason we are even here today is because after the flood was allowed to happen. They didn't cause it. They just knew it was going to happen, and they just buggered out. They said, hey, that way we don't have any of the karmic backlash of having to wipe out all these people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like we created them to mine gold for us.
Yep.
how, and it's like the ruler, Enlil, which little brother, where it was the guy in charge, and he didn't like the humans because he thought it was a moral, ethical issue that we even they even created us to work, to do this, created slaves basically.
Yeah.
So that created a whole bunch of issues between them, and it lasted for many years in their culture, dealing with that whole issue between the two brothers. But again, the flood was kind of like, let's shake up the sandbox. We're not going to have to take any fault to it.
Yep.
But the problem is Enki, the older brother, the one that actually created us to do the job, because he was a great idea, he thought. He goes, I was saving our people. It was a good plan,
Okay.
And that's why he was like, it was his children in a sense. He begat them. He went around and said, hey, Noah, build a boat. Hey,
sympathetic.
get on top of this tree,
Yeah.
climb to the top of this mountain.
Yeah.
All these folks that, have these stories of a god telling them of an upcoming event that will wipe everybody out, and they survive.
Well, that's around the world. Stories
Around
of
the
the
world.
flood and stories of someone called Noah or like something similar to Noah and his family getting on a boat.
Well, there's
it's all
over
around the
300 different stories in 80 different cultures. So it's not like and there are different ways too, not just building a boat. There's one where they were on a great tree, one where you've seen the Devil's Tower in what's South Dakota, I think it is.
The Devil's Tower?
Never heard of that.
Never heard of Devil's Tower.
Sounds familiar.
Even Devil's Tower has a tale of the Native American Indians climbed to the top of that to stay out of the flood when it covered the land.
Yeah.
And it was it's this huge, looks like just a petrified volcano.
Sure.
What it looks like. If you've seen, oh my God, you've seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind,
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Remember the mountain at the end?
Oh, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Devil's Tower.
Oh,
That
okay.
really exists.
Okay.
That place really exists.
Okay.
You said South Dakota.
Yeah, I believe it's South Dakota.
Okay.
It's like right on the border. Maybe it's right
Pull that up.
inside. Yeah, I believe it's South Dakota. Maybe I'm wrong. Or Colorado. It's on the border of the two right there. I just can't remember. I believe it's South Dakota.
Okay, yeah, I've definitely seen that.
Wyoming.
before.
It's still in Wyoming. So it's right before you get to South Dakota. On
Okay.
the Wyoming
It's pretty
side.
close.
It's on the
Wow.
very end of Wyoming towards South Dakota. That's why I was confused.
Wow,
I can't
that
remember
is-
what side it was on.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting looking mountain.
It is a
It is
very
interesting.
interesting looking thing. But that has even a tale by the Native American Indians, how they climbed to the top of that to escape the Great Flood. So there's different stories, and some people got the inside skinny and some people were just lucky,
Yeah.
Yep.
right place, the right time.
Exactly.
But according to science, DNA research, and breaking down all the genomes, we only have 6,000 plus unique genomes that survived the flood.
So 6,000 people.
6,000 individual genomes
Yeah.
that were unique.
Yeah.
So who knows what we lost? Right?
Yeah.
So everybody's basically based off of those.
Yeah.
Whether
There's
they were peppered all
6,000-ish
over the world.
survivors.
A dozen here, a dozen there, 6 or 7 here, 8, whoever happened to live through all this, right? So, anyways, like I said, they wanted to see what would happen, and then of course Enlil found out that Enki went and told everybody and saved some humans, and got really angry, and then there was this huge war of the gods that took place, and then that's also corroborated in the Bhagavad Gita and the Ramayana. There was a major war. The Ramayana goes into a lot of detail. You got to read that one too.
What is the Ramayana?
That's an Indian story. It's huge. It's a very big, story about an alien race coming to our planet to conquer us, and another alien race helping us defend that conquering.
Okay.
And it talks about how there was a royal attack, and that they had to get royal decree to fire these divine weapons from space, and the weapons from space, did damage that affected babies in the womb.
Oh, wow.
Okay, this was stuff that was talked about in this ancient.
Yeah.
This is like.
It almost
6,000
sounds a
years
little
ago,
similar to
7,000
some
years
stuff
ago.
we have.
Yeah, yeah.
Sounds
one
kinda-
one of these weapons would wipe out 10,000 chariots. It described. So it was like a nuclear.
Yeah, it sounds
Yeah.
like a...
Yeah.
And there's radiation, and that's not good for a baby in the womb. Like,
No.
yeah.
Well, here we go. This is why we have this spike of Sumerian that just disappears off the face of the map. Because in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, there was more than just those 2 cities that were affected. According to the Sumerian record, it was multiple cities that were affected during this. So, the legacy that we're dealing with today is still a part of the tales that they have been telling us forever. And we've been getting a lot of this, through time, through the Greeks, through, different, Romans, the Norse, you name it. And they all use the same gods. And I've been studying the gods, too, all over the world, in mythology from Central America. Always the same group of people. Always the same group of people.
Well, it's the symbology is always the same is the thing. That's how you can connect those really
the
easily.
stories about each individual. They're always a female that represents this, that represents this, a male that represents this, that represents with this symbology, with this kind of animal, that kind of a thing. And it's prevalent all over the world. And then you start looking at Joseph Campbell's work. And Joseph Campbell, who did study on mythology, he figured out that there was a common vein, that there is a common story that all of these ancient tales come from. And he was able to drill down to the total outline of that tale and what that tale has been told over and over and over again. And again, it matches up with the whole concepts of the Sumerian record, what we dealt with, how we, got supernatural aid, how we rose as a race is what happened. And after this war of the gods that took place, we were given the right to live. Enlil kind of backed off and said, okay, you guys, but I don't think that really ended. I think, brothers have grudges.
Oh, yeah.
Like a Cold War scenario.
Right. And especially when, if you've seen the Aquaman movie, that's very close to the Sumerian tale.
So that would mean
it's copying it almost perfect, actually. It's because Enlil was the younger brother who had more blood. He had more royal blood. So he became the ruler, right, of here in Anu's name. Right? Anu's the guy, the big emperor. Yeah. But this project on Earth, you had Enlil and Enki. And Enki was the older brother, but he didn't have the same blood. He didn't have enough royal blood, the same, as much as his younger brother did. So that's why his younger brother got control. So you see that with Aquaman, where Aquaman is the half-breed that he's older, he's part human, while his younger brother takes over, and he's the one in charge, and he's more full blood, and hates the humans, and hates the surface, the whole Enlil theater, the whole Enlil thing. So, but getting back to those two dudes, we don't even know Enlil's real name. We know Enlil's his title.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Enlil's a title. It's not his real name.
But Enki's a name.
Enki's a title too.
Oh, it's a title as well. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
His real name was Ea.
Okay.
And that's why we're called Earth. Earth.
Yeah.
Earth. Because he conquered and got us the ability to survive. And because of that, this is his domain.
Okay.
And he's also known as like the devil. And he's overlaid with Lucifer and Satan because he was the great rebeller that went against the real, God, which was Enlil, right? And betrayed him multiple times and went against his wishes multiple times, right? Because Enlil said, no, I don't want you to create these human hybrid slaves. And he's like, I don't want to do it.
Yeah, create some.
And he's like, because you're a young brother and we got to get through this problem. We got to make some gold, so I got to make some decisions and I'll just take the heat afterwards. And he did, he took a lot of heat. There was a lot of conflict between the gods during many years of where we were just nothing to them. We were just cattle. You know what I mean? We were just doing our day-to-day thing. And, it took, according to the, what Sitchin writes, they came here 450,000 years ago. And after being here about 75,000 years, figured out that they weren't going to be able to mine the gold the proper way. The way that they thought they could with Enki being the water bearer. That's what Enki means. It means master of the water. Yeah. And they had a water system of filtering through the soil and using water to irrigate it out and get the gold out. Well, the gold was too deep. They didn't realize it till they got here. And the gold was too deep for them to do that. So they had to mine. And that's when they struggled and struggled and struggled, and they weren't getting the amount of gold that they were needing over these many years. You know what I'm saying? They just weren't producing enough to keep their planet sustained.
So wouldn't that mean, by that logic, that they either found more gold in some other area or they failed?
No, that's when Enki said, "Hey, I've been noticing there's these critters running around that they're pretty big, and we could possibly." Train them. That's what his first idea was. Maybe we could train them, and then when he figured out they weren't that smart, they started to they started a whole program of catching fauna all around, the perimeter of their Eden is what it was, the Earth Den, Ea,
Yep.
Ea's den. That's where his place is. And they started catching these in cages and whatnot to see what kind of critters in the planet that they could use. And then it's so funny, they actually had, obviously being surveilled with cameras, the technology they had. They started noticing that these large hominids were unlocking the cages and letting the animals out. And they were like, hey, those guys look pretty smart. Maybe we could start using those guys.
Mm.
And then it led to, again, a lot of hybridization, cross-hybridization. That's why we have tales of, like, centaurs, and we have tons of tales of,
Chimeras and
chimeras,
whatnot.
Yeah.
all these different things, because apparently they spent, again, they live a long time, so who knows if this is actually correct. But here's the catch. Here, I'll get to the catch in a minute. After about 50,000 years of just creating all these hybrids and creatures and weird animals, apparently zebras and all sorts of stuff was made by Enki
cheetahs.
and his
Is that
cheetahs?
okay.
All these kind of things were all created by these guys who were doing, these hybrid experimentations to see what they could create, because they were kind of having fun. And then they finally started to, get to, the hominids, and realizing that, we need to breed between us and the hominids, because they're not mentally capable of doing what we need them to do. You know what I mean? These hominids, they're clever, but they're not going to be able to take orders. They're not going to be able to operate machinery and tools. They're not going to. They just weren't there. So they figured they had to do some sort of genetic splicing, and that's when the big problem started. Because the Enlil aspect was like, no. They were very righteous, and they felt that they were, going against their God, going against the universal God. You were meddling. You were creating a creature out of nowhere, a slave for all, because you wanted to mine gold. That's all you wanted to do. But that creation finally occurred many years later, when they finally figured out that they needed to obviously bear it from a Anunnaki to have it have the ability to talk and things like that. Everyone before, when they bore it from a hominid, wasn't able to talk. They were kind of almost like a Down syndrome in a sense, but unable to talk, unable to vocalize. They didn't have the vocalization. They were like monkeys.
Yeah.
Monkeys don't have that.
Yeah.
But once they were able to do it through the one, that volunteered, Ninhursag, who is always known as the mother goddess. Ninhursag is the same as all the other mother goddesses throughout history. Frigg, you name it. Same character, same everything.
Got it.
Self-sacrificing.
Okay. All right, that is the 30-minute mark. We will be right back.
You want to take a quick sound check? Yep.
And it's going.
Which would be funny, because if you think about it, if Enlil was like, "Yo, go on this mountain to survive," and they survived on that mountain, and then right after,
Enki.
and they went and survived on that mountain. And afterwards, we're like the Devil's Tower. It's like the exact opposite.
No.
Yeah, like I said, I think that was Western name, but
Yeah.
Native American Indian name is something else for sure.
Definitely.
But no, I think that was a serious. Probably like they got lucky. They knew about it. They the flood. They could probably see it. They're out in the middle of the plains. I mean, Montana's pretty flat.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you ever been in that area, you can see it coming. Climb.
Exactly.
It's like, that doesn't look good.
Nope. Right place at the right time.
It's like it'd be hard to climb.
Yeah, well, the Native American Indians also speak of like two floods too.
Two floods.
Yeah, I've heard
They
two
back
floods.
up. They back up that there was a flood before that as well, and after that first flood, there was a period where they described it very much like a nuclear winter. They said that all the animals disappeared. They all died. They all died of diseases and sickness they didn't understand. The air was hard to breathe. The air made you sick. Yeah, so there was the tales in the Sioux about that. About
Feels
the
kind of
Deadlands.
warm in certain areas.
Well, getting to that, it's like we were talking again, by creating these abominations, as Enlil would say. That's what caused the fissure between the two, and I think that we're like children to fighting parents, living that legacy in our culture today.
Yeah.
Where we're still, after the flood, you had those who were patrons of one particular belief system. Okay. Whether you want to call it the Atans or what's his name? Because you have Akhenaten, and then you have, what's his name? The other guy, Tutankhamun.
Mm.
So you have the Amens and you have the Atens, which were probably an Egyptian cult of the two different belief systems, you know, because one was obviously the death cult, which we're still dealing with today, which is all about killing humans and
Yeah.
getting rid of people and depopulation, which falls in line with the Enlil cult behavior of
Eugenesis.
philosophy.
Genesis, yeah.
Yeah, where it's, you know, this group of people are, you know, should be preserved and these people should be gotten rid of because they're not true bloodline of the original Anunnaki. There's all sorts of stuff on that, but anyways, but we're kind of living in that today, in my opinion. That's why we see that division in, you know, where you have the group of people that are more worship life, and you have a group of people that don't
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
that. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? They want like people to suffer. They want people to die. They want them to go off and
Enslaved.
you know, or enslaved, right? And you know, this again, these are patterns throughout history that are legacies from this trauma, from this occurrence, because this is also very strange. You look up on Wikipedia, or you look up in history, or you look up in science, and ask the question: When do the experts believe that the first human being or Homo sapien appeared? Right.
Yeah.
Funny thing is that matches the Sumerian records and when they actually made human beings.
Okay.
Really?
Okay.
Same timeline then.
Same timeline. You know how old human beings are?
I wouldn't
About
know.
300,000 to 350,000 years old.
2,000 years and not a day more.
I'm just saying about that time.
Yeah.
That's not very long.
No.
No.
That's not very long.
Mm-hmm.
That's why there's the missing link and this whole argument with chromosome 2 of the human, you know, DNA, because the chromosome 2 matched up with like a ape chromosome 2 or a chimpanzee chromosome 2, okay, because we have very similar, you know, genetics. Those particular chromosome matrices, theirs aren't fused. They're actually separated. There's two different ones, okay?
Okay.
Ours is fused.
Yeah.
Now
That
that
is true,
fusing
isn't
could not have taken place in the amount of time between them and us, in that few millennia of years of evolution. Just couldn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard about this. It's actually really big information.
It is,
Mm-hmm.
and it shows a very big possibility of intervention, because the only way you could have fused those genes together is go in there and actually fuse
Do it.
those genes together.
Yeah, and it looks like it was fused that way too.
All right, and that's what it kind of accelerated us from the apes. Is we have that fused together genome, and it's probably because they needed to rush us. They were like, we need to rush this, and we need to
show on the
get this,
road.
get this going one
Yeah.
at a time, and we gotta
Yeah.
get something that's gonna work here.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we too also have a lot of genetic defects.
Yeah.
Just like any, think about if you take a car design and you know rush it through the assembly line real quick,
It's gonna
don't
have
really think it
defects.
out too much, it's not going to be really that great of a car.
Yeah.
You
Or
know,
breeding dogs. I mean, if we got down to
Yeah.
6,000 people, you know what I mean?
yeah, you got a limited gene pool there.
Mhm.
You know, and you're sharing that gene pool over and over and over and over again.
Purebreds have a lot of defects and are more prone to
Yeah, they definitely.
diseases. And
They definitely can
cancer.
if they got puppy milled the wrong way. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, so you know we're dealing with a lot of that today,
Oh yeah.
and you know they want to make us out to be like, I don't know. I mean, I've had some pretty amazing experiences spiritually, but I know there's something more, you know, than what's going on here. And perhaps, you know, we're just these vessels for them, you know. Who knows how all that works?
Yeah.
We could be they could be from another dimension coming into this dimension. Who knows? But we don't know what's going on right now because, you know, their technology probably advanced
Oh yeah.
as well.
Oh yeah.
You know, so what we learned about they did 300,000 years ago, who knows what they're doing now?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, here's a question I would have. If gold is pretty much a requirement for their atmosphere, and that's why they needed more because their ozone was crumbling.
Yeah, in their atmosphere, yeah, their gold atmosphere.
Yeah. How did
Artificial.
how were they originally keeping that up before they had their own technologies then?
Doesn't go too much into like the off-world history and known knowledge, and that makes sense because
Yeah.
No way to know.
yeah, unless you know they're not. Gonna, I mean, these people, you know, whoever was these gods that came here, they're not going to be like, okay, let's tell our slaves,
Yeah,
everything about us, and give them
This is my
all
life
the background
story.
story
Yeah.
and all the secrets to how we got here.
Okay, guys, sit down. Have a seat.
I mean,
Story time.
we know that Roman history. Julius Caesar would chide his lower officers whenever they would teach knowledge to the slaves. That was just a couple thousand years ago. They were like that.
You don't talk to the help, right?
Yeah, you don't want to enlighten them
Yeah.
because then they won't be slaves anymore.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean it's the same kind of concept, and a lot of people, their ego, they get arrogant. They're like, I can't believe we could be created just to be slaves. It's like, huh, really? Well, this entire known history that I remember, slaves have been a pretty contextual
very prevalent.
concept and very prevalent in our societies,
Absolutely.
and a problem throughout history. It's been something that we as a culture, as a people,
Yeah.
have morally and ethically really struggled and wrestled with for 10,000 years at least that we know of.
Well, we
So-
talked about this in another episode. What can you pull up the numbers on what percent of people is a slave? I believe it's 1 in 100,
because
isn't it?
slavery is still prevalent
Oh,
in some parts of
today.
the world.
Absolutely today.
Today.
More than ever.
I believe
It's crazy.
More than
I
ever.
believe
Yeah.
it's 1 in 100 people is a slave according to our statistics.
Wow.
Well, I believe it. I mean, people believe that
1 in 200.
slavery
1 in
went away.
200. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they believe slavery went away, but
No,
No.
certainly not.
it's like one of those whitewashing things where you kind of like,
Mm.
put it out there and, oh, well, hey, we fought the Civil War, we ended slavery,
Yeah.
all right, let's
Oh,
just
yeah,
keep
we're
moving
good.
forward,
Right.
don't worry
Yeah.
about it anymore, it's
Mhm.
solved,
It's solved.
put a
We
check mark
got
on
it,
it, put a
guys.
pin in that, we're done. And it's like, and everybody went to sleep, and
Yeah.
maybe it was done here in America, which we did.
Yeah.
Slavery wasn't happening here in America. People found that out. They did root it out quick. In fact, my mom did it. She actually got a Pakistani woman freed who this Pakistani family came over with their slave. And Mom found out about it because she started going to their church. And she was like, who is this person and why is she coming here by herself? And she doesn't speak any English. And then she finally got an interpreter, found out that she was pretty much a slave.
Whoa.
Wasn't allowed to do anything, was
Wow.
kept control of by these people.
In Pakistan?
No, here.
No,
Oh,
they
here?
brought
They
it from
brought her here.
from Pakistan.
Oh,
They came
from
here with their
Pakistan.
slave.
Brought her here and brought the slave with her.
Wow.
And, Mom sniffed that out. Like I said,
Pretty
people,
ballsy.
It
people
is
don't
ballsy.
dig that stuff anymore.
No.
Yeah.
But around the world, while everybody went to sleep, the
Mm-hmm.
United Nations took over. And the United Nations are the hub
Trustworthy
for this.
UN, so
They're the
trustworthy.
hub for this. There's,
Oh,
there-
yeah.
The old
there-
blue
there's
helmet.
more pedos and traffickers in the UN than there are in Hollywood.
Well, that's actually been a huge problem. You can look up, sex traffic UN, sex scandals UN,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
rape
They're
UN.
horrible.
I mean, it's very prevalent. There's a lot of horror
Yeah.
stories about that.
It's just hidden in plain sight, which is
Yeah.
part of their credo.
Because they're
Oh,
supposed
yeah.
to come and help, but really they give people a nickel when they rape them. It's like that's literally what
Well,
they do.
again, it's part of the karma thing too. It's like they don't participate in it fully. They like to get other people to do it so they can leverage them.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? And it's like that's why you never hear about any of these top dogs involved. It's always these lower Renfield minions like Bill Gates and all them that get caught on the Lolita Express.
Yep.
They're the ones on it. You don't hear about any of what's his name George Soros on the Lolita Express.
No, you don't.
You don't hear about him on there.
Nope.
Oh no. Yeah, because those guys again, these upper guys keep a clean whistle, and if they do anything weird, you would never even know about it. You would
Exactly.
never even know about it. They would never even they wouldn't let anybody know about it because they're just so like just they live in that reptilian world.
Yeah, it's the whole thing. If
Yep.
if someone sees you do something bad, they now have evidence on you.
Right.
They're
Yeah,
on
exactly.
you.
Right.
The dirt.
And that's part of the whole game, That's part of the whole game. And where do they learn this? They've learned this through history. They've learned it through mainly the kings and the queens and those who ruled. Because all of the stories that we tell, even in the Bible, most of the stories in the Bible are about kings.
Yep.
King David, King Solomon.
Yeah.
Come on. Throughout history,
Oh, yeah.
even Jesus, the King of the Jews, king.
Exactly.
Okay, it's all about kings and people who have risen up and led people and were, influential enough to rise into that kind of position.
Yeah.
Whether they were financed or whether or not they were, manipulated or whatever. I mean, that's obvious. But this is all learned stuff. We've all learned this. Just like we know psychology today. Modeling is the number one teacher. Modeling when you see other people do it.
Oh yeah.
When you see something else,
Oh, yeah.
somebody else behave that way, that's the number one way people learn and get taught.
Monkey see, monkey do.
Monkey see, monkey do. And that goes way back. So,
Yeah.
so they fought amongst themselves, and there's a lot of history of that, and that's why we had the War of the Gods. There was a War of the Pyramids as well. Involving Horus, where he was trapped in the pyramid, but he was able to find his way out. And it was the son of Enki. The son of Enki has many names. Amun-Ra would be one. Horus, Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan. Because once they got victory over the Enlil contingent, the son of Enki went around the entire planet and started setting up shop as a god.
About the pyramids, you said something interesting. It's we actually couldn't even figure out how to get inside the pyramids. We had to blow a hole with dynamite to get in.
Is that true?
Yeah, that's true.
They couldn't find the real entrance? Interesting.
We still
They
don't know where the
never found
entrance
the
is.
entrance.
Huh.
They never figured
Even
out
with finding all the tunnels and
Yeah,
everything.
because we know all the tunnels inside.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't know where the entrance
Interesting.
is.
how they got in was
Almost-
something different.
I've heard people say it almost seems like an area to keep somebody. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
we don't know how to get in.
Well, they did keep
We-
people there. They had mummies in there, right?
Well,
No.
Didn't
The
they?
big pyramid there was never any kind of mummies ever found or anything like that. It was what's his name? Khufu kind of pretended like it was his,
Okay.
and he put his little marking on it and said it was his, but he was definitely not the guy that built it. According to the Sumerians, the pyramids, the Great Pyramid was built by the gods, the visiting gods, because they needed a navigational marker for
Okay.
the other Mount Ararat, I believe it was, that was a counter to it, so that if you were coming in from space, which is interesting too, because
we do stuff like that. That's why it's interesting.
well, they've discovered that the positioning of the pyramid is actually on the 30th degree off a bit for atmospheric distortion. So if you're in space, it would be perfectly on the 30th degree.
Huh.
But it's a little off actually on the planet because it accounts for atmospheric distortion.
Interesting.
And it had a white marble finish on it, or white granite finish on it, and then the beacon was made out of this shiny gold,
yeah.
and that could be seen from space.
Yep.
So it was a navigational beacon that would bring them in and line them right up into the 7 cities that, Sodom and Gomorrah, part of those 7 cities that went right into the landing zone where apparently, they would use it to come and go from Mars. Mars was a way station.
And we do similar
That's why
stuff
there's
like
a big
that.
fascination with everybody wanting to go to Mars.
Sure.
We do similar stuff like that with satellites too. When we try and get them into positionings and stuff like that, we actually have areas of land where we have certain symbols built, and the satellites use that to figure out where they are.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Shapes. They can see its shape and they can,
It's like a barcode almost.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what's
So-
the deal with the Sphinx then? Is that related to all of the pyramids and how that's a
Yeah.
navigational marker?
Well, there's a lot of study done on that. I think the Sphinx, according to what Graham Hancock and a few other people have unearthed, no pun intended, is that they've discovered that it was more of like a time capsule of the people of that period right after the flood or before the flood. Like it was a way for them to tell us in the future without knowing our language, without knowing any, if we knew math or any of that stuff, but math would be the key. The more math we knew, the more the Sphinx told us stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, because that's a universal language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can, through history and time,
Binary.
math's always the same, right?
Yep.
So they used that, and the positioning of the Sphinx, which probably wasn't a lion actually. It was probably not a lion at all. It was probably a person's face. Excuse me. I'm saying that the opposite. It wasn't a face at all. It was a lion to begin with.
Okay.
And the face fell off through time. It was worn off because it was basically trying to just communicate. It was in the age of Leo that this took place.
Okay.
So if you know precession, every 2,500 years we go into another system in which our sun on the rise of the first, in the first of the morning, whatever system is behind the sun is what age we're in. And that stays the same for 2,500 years.
So what age
Yeah.
are we in right now?
Pisces.
Pisces.
And we've been in Pisces since 0, which was Jesus is the representation of the sun in Pisces.
All right,
That's why-
Pisces gang.
That's why he was. That's why prior to that it was the sun in Aries. That's why the Jews use the goat's horn,
Yeah.
to blow their horn. They also sacrificed lambs and goats during the age of Aries. Okay, before that it was Age of Taurus, which is about the bull. That's why they sacrificed bulls all around Stonehenge. It was about cows. It was all about the Age of Bull. That's why you have Brahma, which was the bull god. I mean, all these basically all connect to the same calendar. But the question is, who came up with this calendar that's 2,500 years old for each sun rising in each system? So, in other words, every morning if you get up and you go look at where the sun rises and you are able to see the system behind it, it's the Pisces system. It'll stay that way for 2,500 years.
I want to expand on that.
And then it'll shift it goes backwards. So the next one we're going into is Aquarius. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Well, because we're getting into that age, and it's a backwards procession. It's the opposite of the sun's movement through the sols, which is, Pisces, then it's Taurus, and then Pisces and Aries and Taurus and whatever. It goes backwards. So if you go backwards 2,500 years, you're about what? About time of 300 BC, right? Somewhere around there. And that's when we turned into the age of Pisces. That's where the old ways, Noah represented the new ways from the old. They came down and wanted to worship a golden calf, a bull. Okay, that's the sun as the bull. And he said, no, we're not worshiping the sun and the bull anymore. We're in a new age. We're in the age of Aries. So Moses represented the new age of Aries and the Judaic belief of, what is that? I can't remember what it's called. The horn that you use, a shofar. They blow through, which is the goat horn.
So I do want to expand on something you said here. 2,500 years before each change in the
Happens 12 times.
My point is that for someone to figure that out, for someone to actually figure out, especially back then, that's how it is, it sounds pretty.
You'd have to be an off-world enough to see that too. You'd have to have off-world knowledge for that, to figure that out, to have that understanding of the shifting. Or if you didn't have off-world, you would still have to have a lot of time to figure that pattern out.
Yeah.
And you'd have to be able to disseminate that pattern, tell it to the next group of people, which is 26,000 years later.
I would argue that massive technology would be required either way.
So, Pisces, again, we're in. You go back 2,500 years, right? You're still in Pisces, but you're about to enter the age of Aries. Another 2,500 years, you're out of Aries, you're going into Taurus. Another 2,500 years, you're out of Taurus, you're going into Gemini. Another 25 years, you're out of Gemini, you're going to Cancer. And another 2,500 years, which is about 12,000 some years ago, you're in the age of Leo. And that's why it was in the shape of a lion. Because guess what? The pyramids are also in the shape of Orion. Okay, the Great Pyramid and the two pyramids are lined up perfectly with
I've heard
Orion.
that before.
Are they really?
Yes,
I didn't
yes,
know that.
and the entire layout of the Nile region. There's many other pyramids, small ziggurats. Those are all lined up with other stars as well that match up with Orion. But guess what? Since we move through time and we change position, the stars have changed over the past 12,000 years.
Okay.
They've rotated slightly because we're moving through the solar system, or through the galaxy and through the universe.
Yeah, it's true.
Right? So we're seeing a different star setup than what they saw 10, 12,000 years ago.
Sure.
Well, you know what? If you take that precession and you move it back 12,000 years ago, the Orion matches perfectly with the map on the planet.
And
So it's basically telling you when that occurred,
Yeah.
and it's trying to warn you as well of a pattern, and that's right after the flood occurred.
isn't there also some sort of alignment with the other wonders like Stonehenge that also work with that?
Well, Stonehenge was during the age of Taurus. That's why there's just sacrificed bulls and cow skulls all around the edge, proud perimeters. That was the main thing they were sacrificing during that period.
But doesn't it also have some sort of interesting alignment, I thought I've heard?
Yeah, well, Stonehenge is there's also Woodhenge.
Yeah, there's Woodhenge.
Stonehenge represented the moon, which they thought was dead. So stone represented dead things, something that was lifeless, while wood represented life. So Stonehenge was a clock, a universal clock, just like wood was. The wood one was, but one was for the sun, one was for the moon, and then they also connected to the rest of the solar system. Because think about this: you just had a great flood, right? And you have knowledge. You have knowledge of what happened before the flood. But you don't have all the textbooks. You don't have all the.
Yeah.
You don't have everything. You're a smart motherfucker. You were smart, and you were able to, keep that knowledge in your head,
Yeah.
and you were able to bring that after the flood and start to go, okay, we've lost all this technology. We don't know where we are in the universe anymore. This huge flood took place,
Yeah.
wiped everything out.
Yeah.
We don't have any technology right now.
It'd be like
okay?
if you and a couple of people went back in time, like a
gotta
couple
figure
thousand
out-
years. You'd be like, what do we do?
We got to figure out where we are, what's
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
We got to create a clock so we can start tracking the calendar of space so that we know where we are
Yeah.
and what's going on
Uh-huh.
and what day it is and what the time, because I'm sure their time matched up with some greater celestial clock that we're ignorant of, because we're still on the Gregorian calendar, which is a complete lie. So I mean, we're not under any kind of celestial calendar at all.
That's
or
true.
following any natural calendar whatsoever.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
That's why we're kind of disjuncted with our own spirituality in a sense, because it's easy to divert us from the planet and what's the planet wants us to do here, because we're not in alignment with the universe calendar. It's like every year we have Christmas, and then we have New Year's Eve. Well, they're the same thing. Christmas is just a celebration of the new sun. And that's a celestial event. The sun starts to go up again. It goes down until December 23rd. It's in the system of the Southern Cross for 3 days. After the third day, it starts to rise up again, because the sun's back on its rise to summer.
Yeah.
Right? So these are celestial events that we're ignoring, because we've been led astray by a contingency. Again, there's a contingent that wants us to be disconnected from nature and, just be dead,
But for what purpose?
Like I said, it's a trauma that I think that is a legacy left over from, like, a child that's, was traumatized by abusive parents. You know what I mean?
Remember how he was talking about how there's kind of two sides left over of groups
Sure,
of people?
Yeah.
That would be,
The life and the death.
supposedly, that would be their influence.
Okay.
Enlil was, hated humans. I mean, if you look in the Bible, every time Enlil showed up, it was like, these humans suck. They're terrible. They're stupid. Why don't you get rid of them? Just smite them left and right. God, these guys are worse. And then all of a sudden, then God would show up again and be like, oh, this is what you do. Hey, hit that rock. There's water there, man. There's plenty of water. Drink. It's like, oh yeah, it's cool. It's cool. There was like a totally different loving vibe, depending on what was being interfaced with, right? And it was very confusing for me when I first read the Bible too, because I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Why would this? And then it just didn't come across to me as like a divine God, all knowing, when he's angry at himself for making mistakes, not figuring out these humans.
Yeah.
What?
Not very all-knowing.
What? It sounds like somebody who's playing in the sandbox and
Yeah.
doesn't know what they're doing, which it could be anybody on a higher level that's not the divine being or the divine energy of the universe, but another higher, more evolved entity that's, statistically, it's just, there's just no way we could think that they're not out there, and that not have interacted with us so far throughout the millennia and the years and the ages, as old as this planet is. Come on. Anyways, just so many variables and so many possibilities that these other cultures throughout time and place, who knows what could have had gravitational effects, and just whatever planet they could have been on, it could have accelerated their development, could have made them more, well, who knows,
They could
who
have
knows?
collapsed.
Yeah, it could have, other cultures have collapsed over and over again. We never
Yeah.
heard of them ever, and we'll never hear of them again, ever hear of them, ever.
Well, they're a culture that if they did collapse, they would. Their whole atmosphere wouldn't work anymore. So they need to stay functional.
And again, they could be still local.
Yeah.
They could be still within our own solar system that they're just so, on a large elliptis that we don't notice them as much. When science knows there's a 10th planet out there, they say it's there.
Yeah.
That's
There's
true.
a gravitational pull.
Yeah, the gravitational pull. They
Yeah.
always talk about
They
like
always
the
say it.
mysterious pull.
They always say it. So, there's a lot of this evidence here and there, and you start, that's why I'm saying, it's like, it's always best to like read as much as you can in different areas.
For sure.
Don't get caught up, because, you could say, oh, well, the Bible's, Judeo-Christian, and then you could get just, mono thinking and like, oh, I'm never going to get outside of that doctrine, and it's like, there's a lot of good stuff there. Obviously, Christ had a good point. Fighting sucks. Getting along and treating each other is a good thing. We all know that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? So you can't.
Well, I
really
like to
go
think we all know that.
yeah. Which was a complete change in the ideology up to that point, and that ideology up to that point was really kind of given to us by the gods in a sense,
Yeah.
the little g gods, which is conflict and reptilian.
Eye for an eye.
Because remember, they're the dragons. They're the dragons on the gold, hoarding the gold. That's
Yeah.
what their symbology is. So if they bestowed anything to us, because the mammalians that are on the planet don't have the type of reptile brain function as the humans do. Because I know their hominids still exist on this planet. That's why we have Bigfoot sightings. That's why we have Yeti sightings.
So you think
They
that
just-
Bigfoot's real?
Yeah, they just live in a part of the planet that we don't go into. We
there's-
populate a very small part of this planet.
There's massive areas
Very
like
small.
in Mexico that we just have no idea what's in
Well,
there.
there's
I'm sure
places
there's
here
unseen
in North
species there.
America.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
in Africa, in the Congo, there's just millions of miles that no human being's ever been.
It's true. Yeah.
And it's because we can't acclimate. It's too dangerous. It's too harsh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can't survive in it. But a hominid that's, came and bred and came from this planet and was evolved here naturally probably could.
Yeah.
And not be seen and stay away from us, not have anything to do with us, never want to have anything to do with us. Think about here's another example. They discovered this crazy black and white bear that lived in China, and somebody said, yeah, this mythological bear lives up in the woods. No one had ever seen one before.
Mm-hmm.
And no one had ever seen one of these things, a panda.
Yeah.
Panda, stupid panda.
Yeah.
Panda is stupid. It's the dumbest
Pandas are
creature
so
that exists.
stupid.
It is very
It took
stupid.
60 years, dedicated groups of people to find one.
Yep.
Really?
Really?
But before they ever found one.
So-
All they heard was myth and
So,
stories.
so there was myths
The
and
legendary.
sightings and stuff.
Black
Then
bear.
No one believed
they
them.
spent
Oh, there's
60
no such
years.
thing.
Yeah.
They spent 60 years trying to
fake
find
news, dude.
pandas.
The dumbest creature that you could probably come across, right?
And it's black and white. It's so easy to see.
Right.
Yep.
It took them
it
60
stands out.
years to find this guy. For the
No
first time.
camouflage.
So think about a smart hominid, like a reasonably intelligent chimpanzee or a gorilla,
Uh-huh.
right?
Untrackable.
They would.
Yeah.
You would not. Maybe like a ninja, you'd never see those
Exactly.
Yeah.
people. They'd be way ahead of the game on you.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't want anything to do with you because they would have learned that, there's a bad, like even this image here. I mean, if you watch the video on this, for the time period, you see striations in the rib cage, you see striations in the muscles.
Yeah.
If they faked that, they were pretty
Yeah.
impressive.
I've heard
fakers.
people who
Oh, yeah.
analyzed how it's walking, like special ape people.
She's got breasts.
Yeah.
It's a female, by the way.
Yep.
I've heard people who analyze apes talk about that and how it's walking is just so perfect, dead on, to where the only way this is fake is, first of all, someone who actually understood apes and like learned how to walk like them. That's like they had to have been in that suit. That's the only
Well,
way.
they
could be
only
fake.
show you. I've seen good video quality. They only show you really grainy stuff. When you see the real good quality, the game's up. You see muscle striation that you would not have in a fake suit. Like you see it actually move across the rib cage, and you see the muscles on the leg actually roll over the skin rolls
Yeah.
over the different striations of muscles. And I'm sorry, if you're wearing a fake suit back then in the '60s,
Yeah.
there's no way you would see that. It'd be a rubber
No.
suit, that
No.
would be baggy and not sticking to you like that, and having
Exactly.
that conformity to your
Yeah.
rib cage.
Yeah.
And the sheen of the actual hair too. The hair sheens with the sun, and you see it just. I mean, I'm
There's just
sorry.
no flaws in it. Like how it
It's
walks,
true.
how it looks. It really is.
Right.
I mean, if it's a fake, it's the best fake ever for its time.
Exactly.
It's insane.
Greatest
Like,
ruse. Like,
It's amazing.
yeah.
But nonetheless, there's been other sightings around the world, and people are pretty arrogant. Again, they think, "Oh, what are we going here?" But think about it.
true.
We only inhabit probably about less than a third of the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Less than a third.
And we've kept that arrogance of we know everything throughout all time. Like people are like, oh, the Earth is flat.
That's the
oh,
problem.
this is that, and they
Exactly.
just stick with it forever.
They don't
and,
ask questions.
or Darwin's theory. They stick with it forever, and it's not science anymore if you take it all as fact. Science's whole job is to constantly be looking for
Ask questions.
Truth.
the truth.
Darwin
Exactly.
got a lot wrong.
Yeah, he did.
That's what we've discovered,
yeah.
Then there's still more we
I
don't
mean,
know.
he wasn't
He
even
was,
a scientist.
yeah, he kind of his work was off of what's his name, a Scotsman, did most of the work that he got credit for. Same last name as the guy who wrote Braveheart. What's that guy's name? Yeah, but you can look him up. It was a Scotsman that did most of the work. And see, during that time period, if you were a non-noble or a non-person of royalty in those circles, you wouldn't get a book published at all. Nobody would pay any.
Wallace.
Yeah, it was another Scotsman named Wallace actually who did the research. He was actually out in the Galapagos doing the research. out in these,
Wasn't Braveheart's name William Wallace?
William Wallace.
Yeah, I think
So
it's
it's
related to
his-
him.
Yeah.
Oh, it was related to him. Okay.
Mhm.
I was like, that's kind of an interesting coincidence. Like,
Yeah.
Self-insert author.
Yeah, he's supposedly related to
Yeah.
Wallace. So, but anyways, yeah, back in those days, you couldn't get a book published unless you were in the circles of nobility and royalty, because those are the only people that read. Peasants didn't have reading; they didn't need to read. They needed to work the fields.
Yeah, got work to do.
They got
Yeah.
work to do. You know.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to educate the peasants either way,
Right.
because if they get educated, they're not going to work the fields.
Yeah.
And then now that's why when you look at the college systems today, you have a very watered down version of what they would teach themselves back in the 1800s. Back in those days, they would teach you how to be a worldly person, not a compartmentalized, focused into a particular field person. You learned everything at a university. That's what it was called. It was a city of the universe.
So you mean it would
City of the universe.
So you wouldn't have like a niche
a
specialty. Like,
collage.
so
Yeah.
you wouldn't have like a niche specialty. You wouldn't be like a geologist. You would just be. You would have a whole field of understanding.
You would be taught as a gentleman to be worldly and have knowledge in as many things as possible that you could while there, in the interest that you were interested in, while you were, being associated with other people of the same caste that had this knowledge that you were being privy to. That was true privilege back then. That's royalty privilege. This white privilege baloney, I'm sorry, there's only one type of privilege, and that's the royal privilege.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that get everything, while everybody else has to work hard for it, no matter what color you are.
I mean, I'll take
Yeah.
some privilege. Like if someone's
Yeah.
handing it out, I'll
Well,
take it. But
Again, there's earned privilege,
Yeah,
where
that's
you've
true.
done something to get that privilege, and it has nothing to do
Status.
with the government.
No.
You know what I'm saying? They don't have the ability to bestow you any privileges, to be honest with you, and they don't have that right. That's beyond the right. But, we're still living, again, from that legacy of these belief systems, which is very self-abusive, self-loathing, like that's why a lot of your churches and a lot of your, religious teach you to hate yourself, teach you that you're no good, original sin, all that baloney. Because it creates that schism in your brain, just like when any kid that, has, abusive parents that don't get along and then abuse them and then dump them on the street corner and never see them again.
yeah,
Think about how that kid would be with all of a sudden you just left nobody. Parents just left. You're on your own.
Yeah.
And the last thing he said is, well, this one is no good. You're in charge. This group of people's in charge. Because that's what the royals think. Royals think that they were left here to be in charge
Yeah.
by the Anunnaki
Yeah.
as the stewards.
divine right.
Right. As the stewards of this planet. Right. And the rest of us are just,
Lower life forms.
yeah, to be, dealt with as needed.
Peons, yeah.
Yeah, peons. And they believe that they are descendants, even the ones today, believe they are descendants of the pharaohs. And the pharaohs believe they were descendants of the Anunnaki.
The little G's.
And that they all throughout history wanted to take the stairway to heaven. Stairway to heaven was apparently some portal up into the, off-world, existence that you could live longer. Because apparently the Anunnaki, when they were on Earth, they lived shorter life periods. And that's why they didn't like to stay here.
That's actually interesting. Someone in the Bible, I'm forgetting their name. I think it was Noah's grandfather or something like that.
They
There's a
lived a long
passage that's
time.
just like, yeah, they did live a long time in the Bible. You're right, but there was one passage where it's just like, and God took him. So like that could be interesting. Like he liked this one so much, he actually brought him in the portal, and
It's happened.
yeah,
I mean, there's, what's his name? Elijah, he went up. Enoch, he went up.
Enoch is who I was talking about. I
Yeah,
think.
Enoch's one of the first ones, the Book of Enoch. They don't like talking about the Book of Enoch or the Book of Nicodemus. They don't like talking about it because their experiences of interacting with the gods. I mean, Socrates and Plato, they all wrote about how we lived amongst the gods. The demigods and the gods. Because the demigods were half-breeds, like it says in the Bible. They came down and they, had offspring with humans.
Yeah.
Once they created humans, they were like, hey, now. And they were like, hey, and it was actually the dudes on Mars. It was actually the contingent on
kinda
Mars.
fucked up.
You know that? Because they were the ones that, weren't, I guess, disciplined enough to interact and not lose their, their control. Because they were stationed on Mars for so long, they were like, again, bunch of sailors that have been stuck on a planet for years, and then they're like, hey, you got all these human earthlings running around, these females, why can't we go down there and enjoy that? And that's what they did.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. And then it was like, hey, you got all these sailors that you had on Mars. They just came down and started, intermingling with the humans, and now we start having offspring, demigods, tales of these greater humans, Hercules. There's just tale after tale of these great people that were demigods, whether it be Greek, Irish, French. All throughout the lands, you have these tales of these demigod characters that are born of a god. Achilles, supposedly born of a god.
Yeah, it's true. There's Julius Caesar.
Alexander the Great.
Oh yeah, Alexander the Great, not Julius Caesar.
He was born of his mother told him he was born of a god named Ammon, Amon, and that's what his journeys to Egypt was to do. Not only to put Ptolemy back in charge, but to follow the Nile down to the temple where apparently Ammon was still alive. And he wanted to find him to take the stairway to heaven and have complete longevity, live forever. That goes all the way back to.
Then he got murdered.
Yeah, well, he got betrayed probably, or they say he got murdered. Just so you'd forget about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Just so you'd forget about him, even though he went off world.
Oh, interesting.
Because, back then it was a little different than Elijah. Who knows how things were explained, Who knows how they covered stuff up.
That's a good point, yeah.
It's hard. They cover stuff up so much. And he died at 33, which is the Masonics, 33 degrees.
33.
And he was poisoned, which goes to the Rosicrucian by pistol or poison.
Stabbed.
No, he was poisoned.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
Just saying. He was poisoned.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
All right.
Just like Socrates, they got rid of him the same way. They liked poison. And the poison, by pistol or poison, is another one of these groups of people that goes up through history. That's why every president in history, our presidents have all been killed by pistols or assassinated through poison.
Mm-hmm.
Like that one.
Did we have a president
senator.
Get poisoned?
No, we had a senator that we attempted poisoning.
Yeah, we didn't.
Andrew Jackson was attempted poison.
They tried to kill Andrew Jackson like 8 times.
Yeah, they attempted to poison him, it didn't work, and then the guy had 2 pistols and tried to shoot him with 2 pistols.
He missed
and
both of them, and
went
then
they
Andrew
both
Jackson
misfired.
beat him with a cane.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about Andrew Jackson, I do want to point out his last words. It's kind of interesting. Someone asked him when he's on his deathbed, and think about it, he's on Trail of Tears, he's done a lot of stuff, maybe you agree or disagree with it, but he's lived a very accomplished life. And when asked what he did that was the most successful, was the most important thing he did,
Killed the bank.
he replied, "I killed the bank." He died right after.
Yep.
Died immediately after. I killed the bank. Ugh.
That's what he was after.
Yep. Wow.
Because he didn't let the Fed.
The
And
international
that's-
banking cartel.
And that's why they tried to kill him so many times.
Yep.
Well, these people that are running the show today, I mean, these are lineages that go back to those who had knowledge after the flood. Because think about it, if you have knowledge after a great disaster takes place and you have resources and knowledge, you're going to have a big advantage.
Oh, yeah.
Think about it. While every peasant around the planet got wiped out, has no clue what just took place. They're topsy-turvy, life's upside down.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you have another group of people that have retained that knowledge, who still know stuff from the previous time.
Yeah.
And they are able to bring that into this new time without any confrontations, without anybody else but the gods themselves, right?
Yeah.
And, it's just amazing how we're still dealing with that and such polarity. And you wonder where this polarity comes from and why it's embedded in our culture. It's so easily for us to adhere to and follow.
Yeah, and find it.
Fall
It's
into
clearly
yeah.
where it is.
the weak fall into it, like with this
yeah.
whole, even with the politics today, with the the right and the left. That's
yeah.
a polarity that they've created, and it creates such division so quickly, and people
yeah.
fall for it every time.
Yep.
So you got to wonder, why are they falling for it? Why do they fall for this so much? Well, it's part of what's instinctually, either. Over time, we've learned this instinct throughout just ages and
Tribalism.
ages and ages and ages of being taught this belief system by 2 different opposing factions on the planet since the beginning.
Yeah.
And those 2 opposing factions are still going at it today.
Yeah.
Whether they, have direct contact with those original entities that they worship,
Or just the influence left over.
or just the legacy left over from just so much trauma And when you emulate those who do the most trauma to you, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You really do.
Yeah.
And that's a part of maturing and breaking as you yourself as a human being, is to recognize that. But if you say, if you want to look at our culture, our species as a human race, as a person, as a fractal, and you look at the metaphorical sense, we as a people are probably like in our late teenagers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Late teenager. That's why we're like in conflict with ourselves still.
Yeah.
We don't want to follow the rules. We don't want to
Rebellious.
listen to that wisdom of the old world and do what we're supposed to do.
Yeah,
We're
do
like
what I
trying to
wanna
create this. Yeah, I'm going to do what I want to do. Create this new future with technology and get away from this old world
And
system.
on top of that, too, the loss of technology is pretty crazy. Because if you think about it right now, like if you and maybe 10 of your friends went back in time to the Stone Ages, right? And you have all this knowledge about all this technology, you're not going to be able to make almost any of it, though. You know what I mean? Sure, some of it, but
Why do you think Hitler was, trying to get all these devices and all these ancient relics to learn?
Yeah.
Just find out what they were all about.
yeah. And you would try and explain to your kids, like, hey, we had all this stuff, and then it would start becoming myth, start becoming legend. People will start, like, changing it up a little bit, and then just a huge loss of
You saw that
technology there.
speech by Bush Sr. and funny it was September 11th, 1991, 10 years to the day before 9/11.
Wow.
Interesting.
And it was the 1,000 Points of Light speech. And he clearly, distinctly says that we're going to go back to the future.
Does he really say that?
Yes.
Interesting.
And the reason he says it is because it's lost tech.
Yeah.
We have suffered from lost tech.
Yeah.
We were at a period of high technology on this planet due to the God's intervention and being around. But when these great, beyond their power, meteors and asteroids came in and hit the planet, they didn't stop it, didn't do anything about it.
So the technology of Enlil and Enki were lost because of natural causes, is what you're saying?
The flood.
The flood. So they
Flood
didn't...
wiped everything out.
And you think
Interesting.
And you think it was
Well-
natural and not purposefully
Well,
caused?
majority of it was wiped out of the flood. They
Sure.
came back after the flood because, again, they said, okay, humans will allow you to live, and we'll set back up our mining facility because some of you did live, and we'll continue mining gold and whatnot. But see, that broke down, and it became the War of the Gods. And that's where you had
Okay.
this huge fight between the War of the Gods, and that's why you had this unleashing of apparently nuclear weapons, because the nuclear weapons that were unleashed at the time destroyed the Sumerian culture. It was a poison gas cloud that killed them.
Interesting.
And it was because the winds shifted eastwardly after the nuclear exchange of Sodom and Gomorrah, as among the other cities that were destroyed. Okay, once they were annihilated by these nuclear exchange, that radiation gas went east and wiped out the Sumerian people,
I've seen some interesting stuff on
killed
the
by
remnants
poisonous death clouds
Interesting.
that you couldn't see,
Yeah.
couldn't smell, couldn't hear, but people's eyes bled out, their intestines, they basically threw up their insides, they blew out, they shat their insides. They are basically describing radiation poison.
Something interesting too is the Sodom and Gomorrah remains that we think it is. We've analyzed the ash from that, and we've seen about how hot it got, and it got like really hot. Like I believe it was like 1,700 degrees or some ridiculously hot.
They've also
number.
studied the isotopes, and the isotopes are similar to Nagasaki and Hiroshima, except they were over 10,000 years old.
What is what's the stuff called that if you burn? It's almost like a coal, but it's not quite a coal, and if you can relight it and it's still a fuel.
You mean like dry fuel?
So it's like ash. It's like ash, but if it gets hot enough, it can still burn.
Coal's that way.
Yeah,
Charcoal.
I mean,
real coal.
there's another word for it. But anyways, they relit it, and that basically allows you to see how hot it got originally. And when they relit it, it just like went through solid metal.
Well, there's just there's like
They put the
actually
lighter,
fields
like,
of
shit.
glass where the desert was turned to glass. That's still there.
Fields of glass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do believe that all the deserts that we know of today are the remnants of a huge nuclear exchange between the heavy duty powers of the gods trying to fight us, and a contingency with Enki defending and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's what the Ramayana talks about. That's what many other mythologies talk about, that there was some big intervention that took place, and there was some exchange of some major shit. Like, You go study that meteor crater that's out in Arizona. They thought it was a meteor crater. The guy spent millions of dollars to try to get down because he thought there would be a lot of ore and minerals down there because of the nothing. Nothing. Not a thing. Which, you know, and then you go to the petrified floor that's nearby there. That's all laid over away from that. I mean, that could have been a weapon. Because what's around it? Desert.
Yeah.
exactly.
You destroyed everything around it, you know, and it's like, look at the Sahara Desert, all the Middle Eastern Desert, all these deserts, the Gobi Desert, they all match where all these battles took place. You know what I mean? The Gobi Desert was the one that the Ramayama's talking about.
That's a good
You
point.
know, the Bible's talking about one in the Middle East.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
And the Indians, Native American Indians, talk about the one here. You know,
It's pretty interesting.
and it wiped out, and that's where you have these deserts that didn't exist. And that's another thing about the Sphinx that's important is that Graham Hancock and I can't remember the other doctor's name now, it eludes me, but he was the main guy actually. He brought in all these other specialists to study the Sphinx because the way the colleges and universities changed things so that you wouldn't get the knowledge they used to get as they compartmentalized everybody. So an archaeologist didn't have the same knowledge as someone who was a meteorologist, right? So he brought in other people other than archaeologists because archaeologists were the only people allowed to come study the Sphinx for decades and decades and decades. No one else could come do it, but you had to be an official archaeologist to only the one that could do it. Well, they didn't have the knowledge that other people might have and could bring to the table. Well, these guys brought these other folks in, engineers, metal workers, stone workers, meteorologists. Well, the meteorologist knows right off the bat, he goes, wait a minute, that's erosion from rainfall.
Yeah.
And he recognized that the Sphinx had rainfall erosion, and that when you go back in time, guess what? And they do this with the Sahara Desert, because Sahara Desert grows every year a certain amount of inches. So they can track how many inches a year it grows. Then they can go back in time and figure out how long it's been growing and how big it has been and how long it took to get the big as it was. Well, 12,000 years ago, this was a lush jungle. No desert.
Yeah.
Rain.
When he said it was the decomposition from rain, it's a hugely controversial thing. Like we're pretty much split. Like scientists are split right down the middle of it, just because it's so out there. You know what I mean? Like it's like, wow, it's all we have is desert here, but I mean, it looks like it is that.
Well,
So
like I
it's
said,
very
if you
interesting.
calculate the growth of the Sahara Desert and go back in time, minus the growth per year through time, and it'll dwindle down to nothing about 10,000 years ago,
Yep.
which would indicate the desert didn't exist 10,000 years ago. It was tropical. There were forests. There's wood. There's rain. A lot of rain, apparently. And so, but if you had a War of the Gods and nuclear exchange that like wiped out and destroyed the land, you know, not just, you know what I'm saying? That kind of a weapon destroys the land.
Yeah.
Poisons the
That's
land.
the problem
Yep.
with it.
You know what I mean? And it hasn't recovered since. And that was, what, 10,000 years ago or 8,000 years ago, according to the record. And that's why we lost all this knowledge of Sumer, because they all got poisoned. The gas clouds from the nuclear exchange is what killed everybody. Just imagine a huge radiation cloud just going eastwardly,
Yeah.
and everybody just got wiped out.
Yeah.
They didn't have any clue. And even the gods themselves who brought this weaponry, it was ancient to them, and they didn't even know that it would have this effect. It was so old to them. Like Minerva is the one who had the keys to that. Minerva was the one that launched those weapons. So, and it's funny, that's why we name some of our stuff after those crazy people. But, you know, like the Merv missile. So
Yeah.
very similar to Minerva.
That is
Yeah.
interesting.
So, you know, so yeah, it is very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when they do all these ritualistic Masonic stuff on the moon when they land and when they launch space stuff into the space. It's always aligned with some celestial event. Always, 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 always. And all this stuff too, because they learned. They've learned through their, you know, people who've bestowed knowledge to them over history to do these practices. Whoever built the Sphinx obviously built a time capsule that could be read 10,000 years later.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
They
yeah.
knew what they were doing. Whoever built Stone Age obviously had the science and the astronomy to figure out how to align it with the stars and work as a perfect clock.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You had to have some knowledge to do
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
only just the knowledge of lifting up those big rocks,
Yeah. Good luck.
but putting them in the right spot.
Exactly.
Yeah. Engineers still baffle at just that part of it. Like, wow, how did they get? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What
it's
it
quite
took to
interesting.
build these structures.
So we're gonna take a quick break here, just so we can pause it and get back to it.
So, yeah.
Verify.
Yeah. Got to make sure.
All right.
All right.
All right. This is
So you're
part 3
saying
here.
how to bring it all into the modern day.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we were kind of like alluded to there.
Touched
where
on
there's
that.
like
Yeah.
there's definitely a couple of factions in play here: the pro-life and the pro-choice. Maybe I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But one's about death and one's about life.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Right and the left.
they kind of hide it and make it sound all good because it's giving you empowerment and you get to choose, you know, and it's like, well, you know, a moral choice would never even get you in the situation to begin with.
Yeah.
A moral choice would have, you know, dealt with it a little bit differently, and they don't want you to ever think about that. They don't want you to ever do that. Just pull the plug. Just get rid of it. Just get rid of it. Kill it. Kill it.
No repercussions.
I mean, that's why with the
Do
whole
everything.
BLM thing too. It's like they claim to be rioting over 18, you know, blacks killed by cops, you know, a year, you know, but they don't ever pay attention to the millions of little black kids and babies that are murdered every year in abortion clinics.
Yeah.
Way more than whites.
And
way
on,
more than any
and on
other.
top
Way
of that,
more.
the media completely backs them on that. Like I haven't heard
Yeah.
I haven't heard the media talk about the names of the 2 police officers that were ambushed at all.
That's true. It's always
They will
Yeah.
never say a name like
No,
that.
they won't.
If it's a white on black crime, that person's name will be out there. Everyone
yeah.
will know
'Cause
it.
you know the
Come on,
agenda.
Pitchforks.
You know the
Yeah.
agenda. The agenda's
Oh, yeah.
divide. Agenda's not for you to, you know, like each other, you know, hate each other. Because again, you got to learn their doctrines. They have, each one has a doctrine. The Enlil doctrine is anti-human, depopulation.
Mhm.
Okay, these are historical throughout history, over and over again. It's not like it's anything new.
It's interesting that you connected him to the Nazis too, because they were huge eugenicists as well. So that's very interesting.
I'm
It's
just
an interesting
saying.
connection.
They all believe that they're connected to this concept that they're of the higher bloodline, connected more to the higher gods, you know, which make them duly, you know, able to rule. You know, that's their legal positioning, because it's all legal. Everything they did was done legally. You know, even the Nazis, and people don't realize that, but they got all the laws passed, they got all
Yeah.
that stuff done. Just like here, if you pass a law, I guess you got to wear a mask,
Yeah.
right? You know,
Yeah.
It's
Hitler
like-
was voted into power.
Yeah.
yeah.
He just didn't
Yeah.
start doing stuff.
So they appreciated it, you know, and it was also just a lot of manipulation too, you know, just like today. But you know, they had their whole cult thing going on. There's a lot of very, very strange stuff that they were all about. Like that one group, I can't remember the name. I'll remember in a minute though. The Thule Society. The Thule Society was
Thule.
what led up to the Nazis. Yeah, and the study of the, you know, Thule belief system was the predecessor to eugenics. But they learned a lot of eugenics from us too, America. You know, with the Indians, Native American Indians. You know, and that is the same group of people. You know, it wasn't you and me. I didn't own slaves. My family never owned slaves.
Yeah, it's
I
true.
mean, I know a story. We actually helped a slave that was an escape slave, and got up north. And my great grandfather took him in, gave him a job, you know, gave him a place to live. You know, basically turned him in. You know, let him be a human.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, I'm
Pretty
Slavic,
cool.
so every
Yeah.
time I hear
Yeah.
someone like repercussions for slaves, I'm like, I'm
Well,
Slavic.
check
like,
this out. he took the family name, which was Denning, but he made it Denny, and then he went out to Arizona in the late 1800s. and was an Indian fighter. He was in the Indian Wars and actually got the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Oh wow.
Nice.
This is on the books,
Uh-huh.
right? So it's funny how like my family directly didn't fight any Indians, but
Yeah.
you know, we helped a slave that went to join the cavalry and you know and went and fought Indians in the Indian War. But there's a manifesto that I've noticed that and other people too have noticed, and other people brought it to my attention, you know, back in my early research, you know, that there's one group that are again want to dominate, want to rule, want to just, you know, oppress, because they want to control humanity. They want humanity to be under the thumb, under the boot, because they look down on it. They don't want it to grow. They don't want it to flourish. They want to keep it arrested development. You know, they want to keep it in the matrix. They don't want it to
Yeah.
flourish. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? They want to keep boundaries to it, keep it
Yeah.
on the world. Don't go to the moon. You know, don't go in the bottom of the ocean. Just whatever they can do to like,
And a lot
suppress
of
it.
and the people that all follow that think they're going to get to be in charge of whatever's left.
Right. Well, they that's the whole scam, is that it's the whole schema is it's all control. The control mechanisms are the boundaries they're giving you.
Yeah.
So the people that they are using are the ones that they say, well, you get to control this little bit of the,
Yeah.
this little control
You get to
mechanism.
do this when no one else does.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
get 2 scoops.
It's like the toll booth guy that gets a power complex when he's
Yeah.
got this little dominion over the power, this little toll booth. It's the same concept, right? Yeah, but that's what you're seeing right now with all this and it's really self-loathing. The only way that you could actually
I would
behave
agree
this
with
way
you.
is if you
Yeah.
hate yourself, and
Yeah.
you hate people, and you hate everybody, and
Yeah.
and you don't care, and you're just going to do it because you're going to get yours.
Yeah.
Because that's very reptile.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
very
yeah.
reptile thinking. And they recruit these people, and they actually want these people to come up through the ranks. That's why they've built the system the way they've built with education, is they made it very cutthroat and very reptilian and very negative feminine, which is manipulation, which is doing things kind of behind your back, where it's subtle sleight of hand. It's not very forward. That's why the corporate world has changed to more feminine, to where you can't be forthright and just say what you think. You have to
You have
everything's
to dance around.
everything's done very, very differently. It's very manipulative. It's very deceptive. It's very not straightforward at all. And that's a negative aspect
Yeah.
of femininity. It's not the positive, of course.
Yeah, of course.
But they've used that, and they've used that under society because they want you to hate yourself. They want you to live in misery, and that is that contingency. That is the Enlil contingency. That they want to oppress you from above.
Now, what is the other side doing right now?
The Enki, which is the humans, human rights, the people that have been fight through history for humanity.
Uh-huh.
Even our founding fathers, for all we know, could have understood this concept really greatly.
Sure.
They put together the government the way they put it together as a fractal of our human brain, because the best way to rule a fractal of a human society is through a fractal of a human brain, right? That's what would give the society the same sovereignty as the human being could have in its own general faculty and how it, governs itself. So the executive branch is your frontal lobe, your frontal cortex, or your executive, and then you have the limbic, which is your legislative, and then you have the reptile, which is judicial, the law, right, which is set in stone, which is the way it's going to be. But luckily, we can
The
change that.
executive-
Them in check.
Yeah.
We can change that with the legislation. We can change those laws. We can make changes if we need to, because in the legislation they call it Congress. Well, Congress is another word for man and woman getting together and having sex. To have Congress. Well, that's man and woman coming together because they care enough to create something that's going to be
Okay.
beneficial.
Interesting.
Right?
Uh-huh.
And then the executive, which is the Neo, is what takes action in the world and makes it happen. Right? Because that's a part of your brain that actually makes you different from the animals to take action in the world, to build things, to change your environment. Because a dog doesn't do that.
No.
Yeah.
Cats
no,
don't really do
no,
that.
they don't do
They
that.
don't change our environment the way we do.
No, yeah.
We don't make action in the world as they do at all. We can actually change the world around us
Yeah.
to a drastic degree, right? But we're taught that we can't,
That's true.
and we're taught that we shouldn't, and we're taught to be behind bars or to be behind all these rules and regulations and oppress these guys, these elites who worship the negative aspect of Saturn, which is the death cult, which is Saturn's about death, which is that's why it's time. Kronos is all about time. Time is wins at the end. You're all going to end in the end.
Yeah.
When you run out of time. So, but they take it to the negative aspect because of this contingency of self-loathing, self-hate, of self-destructive behavior, and that comes from a conditioning that you get that from modeling. Someone teaches you that. And it's been taught through generations and generations, through eons, through the royalties. The royalty has been taught that they're better than you, and that you are no good, and you got to be lesser than them, and only they can rule, and only they get to make divine decisions, and you don't get to do any of that. You got to follow. You got to do what you're told. You're a slave, because that's the dynamic that we have been dealing with since the consciousness of the human being came to fruition. Is that we were made to be slaves, and we've been fighting not to be slaves since.
Yeah. So here's a question I have. Here's a question I have. With the two sides, at least at the very tops, there's going to be cohesion. Like, they're going to understand what's happening. They're going to understand all of this and more. My question is, how has it been that we've been here for so long and we still have the original two sides still going at it, almost dead even?
I wouldn't necessarily say it was dead even. I think there's been a lot more killing on this planet than a lot more good.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I mean, but at the end of the day, we're all still pretty much free. We can all pretty much do what we want. We have a lot of
that.
rights.
We're
We
in a
can
bubble
say,
here, man.
Yeah, dude.
Compared to the rest of the world,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah,
the rest of
that's
the world
true.
don't experience that at all.
No.
You know?
Mhm.
There are certain pockets that, you know, have strived to reach that Western ideal of peace and you know, charity and treating people well, but you know, it's hard to maintain that when you have those forces that still believe in that old system, and for all we know, they're drinking the Kool-Aid from that old belief system, and they're
Oh,
still
yeah.
doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it could be off-world. I mean, some people think that the off-world influence is still there.
Yeah.
You know, that we're just now a municipality of a greater cosmos, and we have to be ruled just like everybody else, and we got to go through our growing pains like everybody else. You know, like any teenager in their development, they have to go through the inner conflict and fight themselves, the good or the bad. Are they going to do this? Are they going to choose this path? Are they going to choose this path? You know, and that's kind of like seems to be the ongoing theme throughout even science fiction and modern writing.
Oh, yeah.
That's the true dilemma. Is are human beings ready for the next leap into their existence, or are they still going to be stuck reliving and redoing the same thing until they get it right?
Yeah.
You know,
Probably
It's
that.
and the
just-
door's not going to open
the
to the
thing that-
celestial kingdom until we do.
The thing that does interest me a lot, though, is that you guys are right that we have had a lot more death than we've had positives, and that side is winning. But the thing that interests me is that both sides still exist. I would almost think that after so long, either like freedom and free thinking and rights would have won, and that would have been the new thing of the lands, or the other side would have won. But it's interesting to me that there's still a power struggle. That it's
I think that was a
still-
part of the treaty that they concorded was
with the
that,
Cold War you were talking about, type of thing.
that it was that the humans were allowed to live
Uh-huh.
and they weren't going to be judged anymore, and that they had free will. And by doing that,
Mm-hmm.
they still kept us contained because they knew that free will could eventually come after them, that we could grow and develop and get beyond them.
Uh-huh.
So that's a fear too.
Okay.
They're like, we don't know what you created here. And Jesus, after the past 400,000 years of dealing with them, they're pretty hard to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, let's just keep them on this planet.
Okay.
I mean, even the Native American Indians talk about how we're quarantined on the planet and not allowed to
that
leave the
actually
planet.
I
Yeah.
mentioned before.
You know,
yeah.
there's a lot of myth on that.
So you're saying the reason that neither side has won yet is because the larger powers that are influencing both sides have basically made the agreement that they're going to have a more laissez-faire stance and just let their influence see who's going to play out.
Well, because we fought so hard to defend our existence,
Uh-huh.
they and didn't win. They didn't get rid of us.
Yeah.
They believe in that karmic concept too. And they like, okay, well, if we couldn't get rid of you after all this,
Yeah.
then maybe we should let you give it a go.
Yeah.
Maybe the
Okay.
universe is telling us that we should back off and let you guys give it a little time.
Uh-huh.
But you still have a malignancy in the children. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You still have the children that were still affected by the trauma.
Oh, so you're saying that the original two brothers, that their whole rivalry actually ended with...
When they left the planet.
Yeah, so it actually ended with them being like, okay, well, you guys are successful. You guys
Good
get
luck.
to do whatever you want
Yep.
to do now.
But they're
But-
going to contain us here.
But their
Oh, yeah.
former influences of the
Don't
war...
let them get off the planet because you never know what they're going to do.
No.
Yeah. But their former influence of the war and how they've already turned people against each other is still staying here. It's still a,
It's like
it's
that.
still a
it's
thing
like,
that lingers.
Like when people have blood with each other, bad blood.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's like it's hard to get rid of that.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you have something that's like that big, that was that big, it was global.
Yeah.
It wasn't like some little skirmish in South Vietnam that lasted 10 years. It was like something that took place over millennia.
The First World
constant
War.
conflict. Constant conflict because we the first creations, even the Popol Vuh, which is a Mayan book, one of the few that we've been allowed to access. It actually very clearly says that there were 4 creations that the gods made. The first one didn't venerate them and took off. Said, we know we're not slaves. We're out of here. And they were known as the firstborn. And the firstborn is supposedly that Lucifer or that serpent. Remember, it was a serpent that came into the garden.
Yeah.
So if you're the firstborn and you were a lot like the gods, smart enough to know you weren't a slave, And then you came back into the garden and said, hey, you guys, the second virgins that are dumbed down now,
Yeah.
naked in the garden, sent naked into the garden, it means stupid.
Yeah.
You're dumbed down, right?
That is
And
interesting.
the serpent who had knowledge, who
Yeah.
didn't lie to them,
Uh-huh.
who basically said, hey, there's this knowledge that you're being kept from.
Uh-huh.
And that has been turned into again, from the Enlil faction, into fearing that knowledge and fearing that firstborn and fearing those first that were created. Because again, the Papa Vu also corroborates that. The first one didn't venerate him. The second one left and was taken by the first one. The first ones came in and said, hey, you're a slave. You need to come with us. You're part of us. You're part of us too.
With that, I almost think it sounds more like a test as opposed to the first ones coming down and being like, hey, you could, eat this apple.
Well, the fourth ones did, though. The fourth ones did do.
Well, what I'm saying though is you were saying that you think that the first one could be the snake, but what I was more saying is it almost sounds like a more contained area, like the Garden of Eden, to test to see how we would react to certain things, like almost like a laboratory. And they're like, hey, just never eat from that tree over there. And then they bring in this person who's like, well, hey, if you want knowledge, you know what I mean? And then it's like, okay, well, these guys want knowledge, so we're gonna like turn it down 10% and go from there. You know what I mean? It almost kind of sounds more like
the original Exodus story is from the
experiment
Sumerian record. It wasn't the Jews leaving Egypt. The original Exodus story was the Adams and the Eves that left the garden when the first serpent came in and said, you guys are slaves and you need to get out of here.
Okay.
And that angered the gods big time. And they
Go figure.
Yeah, because they were like, we make this first slave, it's too smart, it's got too much of us in it, and it leaves. And then we make another slave, and then our first slave comes and then breaks them out.
But Adam and Eve don't sound like slaves. I mean, it sounds like they pretty much had everything they wanted.
No, the Adamic was a worker, and he was not happy because he didn't have a mate. He was just like a worker. That's why they created the Eves, because he needed to have that not working time.
Oh, okay.
To feel like an animal again, to be connected to that. He still had that, gena, that still, procreation was still a part of their genetic makeup.
Yeah.
So, and that's what even talked about in the Bible, that Adam was sad and was down.
Yeah.
And we wondered why he was so upset.
Yeah.
Well, because, hey, I'm not getting any, man.
Yeah.
It's like I just work all day long, man. You just got me working all day long. And then the production went down because they weren't working as much, right?
Because they're upset.
Think about it. Then you make the Eve, production goes up.
Exactly.
Adam's happy. Work is back
Morale
on
boost.
schedule. Yeah. And even the first, it even says in the Bible that they weren't able to procreate at the very beginning. Eve wasn't able to procreate. And that's also in the Sumerian record. And that's like a mule. When you make a mule, they can't procreate. And it wasn't until later that Enki gave them the ability to, and that's where the rib concept come from. It has nothing to do with Adam's rib. It was actually because of the genetics that they pulled from his rib, the Enki's rib, that they were able to give the genetics to the female to allow the humans to have procreate or to offspring and continue and not need to have artificial insemination like they had been doing. And creating slaves from artificial insemination.
And this is all in the Sumerian record. Okay, wow.
Yeah. And they went through all this testing, and like I said, they had to finally, that's why Ninhursag is known as the mother goddess, is because she sacrificed herself and bore the first hybrid, and that's the one that was the first Adam. And don't think of as Adam as an individual, but think of Adam as a group, a race of humans that were male, and they were made to work. And when they were not happy anymore and they weren't getting much work out of them, they had to make the Eves to make Adam happy and make Adam work more. Because they saw that the hominids were all doing that kind of stuff. And they did it too. They had sex. They were all about that too. They definitely were all about that. Mm-hmm. And they could have sex with their own family members and incest. That's why we've picked up these aberrant behaviors like incest, and we find it only in the royal families. Yeah. And they're the only ones that have been doing it for the past 10,000 years.
Pretty much.
Because their genetics, they could have offspring without problems, without genetic defects. They were more naturally evolved beings, not like us, right? They were naturally evolved beings, and they were able to procreate amongst themselves, whether or not they were related or not. But we can't. Yeah. Because we're not a naturally evolved being.
Yep.
We're kind of truncated and obviously intervene.
Well, wouldn't that mean that, like, dogs are naturally evolved beings, right? Oh, wait, well, I guess wolves. Animals that are naturally evolved, though, if you make brother and sister have sex, it's going to end up with a
Animals don't really have as much as humans do.
That's
Because it
true.
happens. Because in the packs and the groups, they don't find another pack to mingle with.
No.
You know, they mingle with themselves if they have to.
Huh.
You know, brother and sister in the animal kingdom doesn't happen as much as it does.
Yeah.
But nowhere near as much as humans.
Yeah.
Humans, boy, you got a high probability you're going to have some pretty messed up kids if you do it with your family member,
Yeah.
or close family member.
Uh-huh.
You know, but the funny thing is it's a practice in the royal.
Yeah, the
you know,
royals.
They've
Yeah.
been doing it for 10,000 years.
I mean, yeah, they've done it to the point where people are just every baby's blind.
It's a learned thing.
Yeah.
It's a learned thing because you don't do it naturally. People don't do it naturally.
That's a good point.
We don't do it naturally. We don't think, hey, that's a cool thing. No. A culture that's left on its own in a rural environment figures out on its own, you don't do that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They just know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But these folks know differently. You know, they're predators, predators. Predators.
Interesting.
They've been here predating us, and they've been doing these predated practices of predatorial behavior against the peasants through this type of manipulation and through this type of living off of them and whatnot, and keeping it within their own, you know, networks of control. That's why they didn't procreate outside of their networks, is they would lose control. You know, you couldn't trust these people.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So that's why they do it. They did it too, but they did that because they learned that you could do that, but they learned it from somebody to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Who taught them to do that? Because the gods were doing it all day long. Enki
Yeah.
was having sex. He had sex with his daughter, his granddaughter, and his great granddaughter.
They put a very high emphasis on blood. I mean,
Interesting.
that's they put a huge emphasis on blood. I mean, the royals, all
Oh,
those
yeah.
types of people.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about for them. So that's why they're not going to let in just some random outsider and like taint that.
No.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, there's also that belief that, you know, your blood is, you know, the more pure blood it is, the more you retain that genetic power and that genetic memory. You know, the more you dilute it down, the more that genetic memory gets lost.
Mhm.
You know,
Well, that's a fact. Every time you have a kid, its DNA is going to be a little bit weaker than yours. I mean, that's
a little
just
diluted
yeah, it's
than yours.
Yep, a little bit more
I don't want to say
diluted.
weaker, just diluted.
Well, I mean, it loses genetic coding. Either word works.
That's why you want to find someone of stock.
Yeah,
That's why they use those terms.
yeah.
You
Well,
know,
it does.
good stock,
Yep.
Yeah,
pedigree.
that's true. But anybody at all, though. I mean, it's anybody at all, though. Anyone you have a baby with, it's. I mean, we are losing DNA over time. So that.
You mix it.
Right.
That's why the Vikings they didn't intermingle. They didn't, you know, if they raped you, you were dead afterwards.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want offspring with you.
Yeah.
Because it would dilute their bloodline.
The Vikings are powerful.
They still rule today.
Yeah.
The original Vikings that kept conquering and still conquering today. Still in charge. The original 6 kings.
6 kings. Yep. I was
Yes.
waiting for you to say it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, again, all related to the same group of bloodlines that go all the way back to think they're related to these Anunnaki, who all believe that they're, you know, like you said, divinely ordained to have this power and to rule.
Yeah, to rule on everyone else.
Yeah, and that's what it is today. It's the same group of people, you know, it's the same group of people.
So
Crazy.
by that logic, I mean, you could follow the bloodlines of most famous people, most renowned
Yep.
people.
Well,
and you
like
could-
Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, they're royalty, French and British royalty. They had to get married because they had to keep a treaty that was 1,000 years old, or they would have lost land in Normandy. And,
Really?
Oh yeah, it's an old thing. That's why his career took off after he did that, because when he was with his true love, his career was kind of like, you know, he was just doing things here and there with Jennifer Aniston. And I think they basically said, hey, you got to leave her and marry this girl, because we got to
we
keep
have
this treaty.
1,000-year-old treaty
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
going to need to get signed.
We're not
here.
going to lose land, buddy. That's not
Yeah.
going to happen.
It's crazy.
Yeah, this stuff goes way back. These
Yeah.
people hold grudges for a long time too.
It's insane.
You know, we bloody their nose back in 1776 and whatever. It doesn't mean it's over.
Yeah.
That's why they're back. That's why
Yeah.
they're here now.
Yeah, well, they didn't even leave. I mean, they stayed the whole time.
No, they
Just
didn't. They just
trying to
changed
get the Fed
forms.
in. Yeah, just surviving any way they could.
Changed forms. You
Yeah.
know? And they do a good job in that.
Mhm.
They're still here.
I would say.
Gates is a Nazi pedigree.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
His parents are all Nazis. I mean, his mom was on the board with Watson, and Watson was a personal friend of Hitler. You know, his dad was on the board of eugenics. I mean, they're all Nazi pedigree. They're all in this group of, you know, anti-human, and they all want you to die.
That's insane.
And that is a brainwashing that goes way back. This isn't new. This is old. So old it's new.
I mean, and the thing is they don't even hide it. They say it in front of you. He says there's too many people. We know we know the Foundation has done things that were really despicable in Africa.
Yep.
We've heard him say he wants to give African Americans and old people the vaccine first.
Yep.
What does that even mean? Why would you say that? Like,
He said that.
he said that.
Oh, he did.
Yeah.
I know. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow.
I know.
It's just like, it's
Hello?
that thing of
Dude.
like, you're
It's arrogance.
kidding
It
but
is.
not kidding.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's
Exactly.
like, you know that it's on purpose. And he made it out to be like, oh, well, we want Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter, so we're going to give you
I-
the inoculation
Yeah.
first. Enoch. Think about it. That's the word.
yeah.
The wording.
Yeah.
You're about to be
Yep.
inoculated.
Mhm.
Turned into Enoch. And Enoch was genetically manipulated. And this new vaccination is going to be a genetically manipulative genome that they insert into you that are going to basically turn you into a non-human.
And Bill Gates has actually said that is one of the things he's working on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Genetically turn you into a non-human, because then they can wipe you out without the karmic backlash, because
Oh,
you're
yeah.
no longer a human.
That's
have
right.
rights
You
anymore.
actually lose your rights at that point
Yep.
because corporations are not allowed to own anything made by God.
Exactly. Well, they say the second it's manufactured at all, even
Yeah.
if it's a
Or
living being,
manipulated.
Yeah,
or manipulated,
yeah.
it's property.
Yeah, you can now own
It's
it.
property. And that's what they're trying to do.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Make you owned.
Mm-hmm.
And they do it by getting you to foolishly take some stupid injection with nano material.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
People won't believe you when you say that shit,
Yeah.
but that's true.
And we're not
It's
even
insane.
and we didn't even bring up the things that could potentially happen through your DNA being changed artificially from a shot. We're just bringing up the fact that you technically would have no rights at that point. You'd technically be owned. But God only knows what that's actually doing to you physically.
Yeah, it's probably just turning you into just a drone,
Yeah, so-
basically.
Yeah.
You know, that's probably their goal. And again, then they can get rid of you easier, you know, dispose of you without their karmic backlash. Because again, they believe in that greater power. They understand that there is a law in this universe. There is a mechanism that we're bound by. And they've been here long enough and figured it out. Then they're trying to manipulate it, and they try to work within it, and they try to use it. That's why they always adhere to the celestial calendars for rituals. You know, the Samhain and all these different stuff that go on during the year. You know, you watch, the closer we get to Halloween, the closer we're going to start seeing some more of this behavior.
That's
more,
true.
More
Oh,
sacrificial,
yeah.
sacrificial
Yeah.
behavior, people being killed.
That's how it happens every time.
Yeah, it goes up because this period is a time of ending sacrifices. This is an end cycle sacrifice, which could be in our favor because we hopefully are ending this cycle that
Yeah.
we've been in with these people. And it kicked off back when? At the beginning, in spring, at the beginning, what they call initiation rituals. So it began at the initiation ritual, and let's see if it's going to end at the completion rituals, which is Halloween.
Dude.
So yeah, they know this stuff. They use it. They follow it.
Yeah.
They don't want you to know astrology. They dissuade you from learning that, but they know it.
Well, they consider. I mean, they mock
They know-
astrology. They say it's
Yeah.
like a crock thing. Like,
Yeah,
why would you
exactly.
ever look at that?
Just go to the diocese here in Los Angeles, the largest one on this hemisphere. It's laden with astrology.
Oh yeah.
They even have it on the floor, the astrological symbology. It's like, really,
Dude.
all you people, everybody I knew who was Catholic was told not to do this. Here it is.
Yeah.
I mean, they have it like laid out. Really, it's very obvious when you know the symbology what you're looking at. But most people don't. They don't realize that
They just think it's interesting artwork.
yeah, you're getting a cross between
Yeah.
Zoroastrianism and pagan Babylonian stuff here, baby, and no one even knows it.
Yeah.
And that's a part of it. You know, they keep you ignorant, so you don't know what's happening to you. So the more you know, the better off you are. So that's why I recommend read these other books. Don't just listen to me.
Yeah.
You know, read these other books. Find
So,
out for yourself.
What are some pieces of literature you'd recommend then?
You know, again, start with the Bible.
Start with the Bible.
Start with the Bible, because that's got your Old Testament, your New Testament. Check out your Hindu, which is your Bhagavad Gita.
Yep.
You know, your Ramayana. Those
Speak-
are good texts to get to.
Speaking of books, do you recall the book you showed me before, where it was basically saying Trump on 51st Avenue, like in a castle, like 300 or 400
the last
years?
president.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it? Was it the last president?
Last
What's it called?
president, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting. I was telling
Yeah,
you
you
about
talked
that,
to me about
Josh.
that.
Yeah,
I
I
was
couldn't remember the
interested in
name of it at all, but we'll pull it up here in the back cover.
Yeah, I'll have
For
to
sure.
remember that guy's name. But yeah, that guy was actually a general that was an aide to Lincoln,
Interesting.
and was also connected with that whole Atlantis project. So there's a lot of interesting stuff during that time. You know, they were going to be studying Atlantis because of that one seer that was able to get information when you were sleeping. It was weird. I remember his name, but he wrote like journal after journal after journal after journal, and major prophecies that came true. And that's why Lincoln believed him and said, okay, and it was going to fund this search for Atlantis, and then he got shot. But
Damn.
yeah,
It's a shame.
yeah, it's crazy because they want hidden. You know, they don't want you to find out.
Yeah.
They want it for them.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why it was only Nazis and Hitler and all those guys that were out there getting that stuff. No one else was doing that but them.
Mhm.
No one else was thinking about that. You know what I mean? No one else was like thinking about that. Who was thinking about that?
Yeah, no one.
You know, in the 1930s, hey, let's go around the world and find all the mythological artifacts that all these books write about and gather them up.
Yeah.
We don't even know if they exist. You
Like,
know?
dude, there's like wars everywhere. Like, what are you
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah. Throw money at it. Well, that's why they created probably that the conflict is to distractions.
Yeah.
So
That's
they could go
definitely
do what they were doing while you were watching the shiny object, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing I've noticed. Whenever they do something, there's always a multitude of reasons that it benefits them because they've
yeah.
thought it all out so much. That, like, you can go like, wow, and this connects with that, but it's like, okay, well, yeah, Abraham Lincoln was also against the Fed, so here's another reason. Here's another reason. You know what I mean? So it all just stacks up on.
Think about if you have off-world knowledge that goes back 400,000 years.
Yeah.
Think about how much of an advantage you would
It's
have.
huge.
How much of an advantage
Yeah.
you would have.
You'd be playing a whole nother board game.
You're in a whole nother league.
Chess
Oh, yeah.
versus
You're in
checkers.
another league,
Exactly.
You know? It'd be like worrying about the ants in your house are going to take over.
Yeah. Which
So
I
not-
mean,
You're not worried about that.
No.
That's
You go buy this
I know.
stuff and you go put it over there and they're all
they're
dead.
just psst,
Yeah.
Later.
spray.
That's about as
All right.
far as you think about it.
Yeah.
And that's how they probably think about us, in a sense.
Yeah, well,
crazy to think about.
Yeah.
You know?
They openly talk about it stuff in that realm. I mean, if you just
Another good book to read, which is really very fascinating, which is Battlefield Earth.
Battlefield Earth.
that sounds like an interesting title.
Battlefield Earth, I could tell that he also read the Sumerian record because in the preface, what starts Battlefield Earth is that this other solar system comes upon our Voyager satellite. And the Voyager satellite, well, we put 2 gold discs on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh.
And you could, record and recordings of all these human languages and stuff, right?
It's very funny.
That's
Well,
directions of Earth.
guess what? Gold was a high commodity in the universe.
Yeah.
So when the Cyclones found this, they went up on the open market. Earth was auctioned off to the highest bidder. Corporation bought Earth and started mining. Well, when they came to Earth to start mining, they just gassed the planet.
No.
It was their planet, so they just
Yeah.
gassed it, and every indigenous thing that was on it was killed. Except for a few that survived. And then they started their mining facility, which sounds very familiar to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Right.
feel like
Interesting.
we were talking about something
That
in the
sounds
realm
familiar.
of that at some point here tonight. I'm not sure.
Well, Star Wars follows the Sumerian record. The latest Aquaman does. Almost
Yeah.
every movie that's mythologically based, that's
So-
anywhere successful, always follows the same formula of the Sumerian record.
Well, let me ask you this then: do the creators of these pieces of media know they're
I
doing
think
that?
they know it for sure.
It can't be a
I think
coincidence,
they
right?
have to know.
And they learned it from the gurus of their past, which were Lucas and Spielberg, who
Yeah.
were students during the Discovery period. When they discovered it in the 60s, this changed. I mean, you realize the Sumerian record changed science fiction forever.
Yeah.
Because before the Sumerian record was found, our science fiction was pathetic.
Yeah.
Our vision of the future
true.
was horrible. If you watch some of those old movies from the 50s and the 60s prior to that, like even the 40s, Flash Gordon,
Yeah.
it's just horrible visions of the
Whoa,
future.
Flash. Okay,
Not
hold on. This is.
79 Flash Gordon. We're talking 1940s Flash
Yeah.
Gordon.
Way
Oh,
back.
okay, all right,
Okay.
all right. I was about to have to draw a line in the sand. I was like,
Totally different.
Yeah.
But in the 60s, when they discovered this, then we had a huge boom of science fiction. We had Planet of the Apes, which is very similar to the Sumerian story itself,
Yep.
right? Then we had Star Wars and this being written during that period started coming out, right? And all the movies started coming out after that, all started matching the Sumerian record.
Dude.
So I did have one more question for you here. When the little G's were warring over us, pretty much, did we play an active role in the battles, or
Yeah.
we
That's
played
why
an active
Abraham's so important. He was a cavalry elite expert.
role? So
He led many campaigns against the other side.
So my question would be, that would be basically we're warring against each other while they're warring against, while the little G's are warring against each other, and we have like,
We were with them. We had demigods as well.
uh-huh.
You had humans, demigods, and gods.
So
You
my
had gods on the field,
Yeah.
which was a big deal.
Yeah.
okay, so that's pretty interesting. Yeah,
It was a big deal.
yeah,
This whole event,
yeah.
because they were actually participating in it.
Mhm.
It wasn't from on high. They were down there with us, and we were them. We were all defending our right to live here on the planet because we had a lot of demigods and gods that were on our side.
Yeah.
That you
Yeah.
know, these humans rock,
Mm-hmm.
especially the chicks. Apparently.
So it all comes
Apparently.
down to, ladies
Yeah,
and gentlemen.
There you go.
Always.
It always goes back to that.
Always.
It always goes back to that. But hey, you got to hold on to that masculine side because it's the weak, the dominated feminine side that gets enslaved.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's the right brain that is atrophied, causes that enslavement mentality. Just like on the planet, the right hemisphere of the planet is where slavery comes from.
Oh.
Doesn't come from the west side of the planet, which is the masculine side.
Yeah.
You know, so you see it's more fractals. You
What
know?
is what is a weak masculine side? What are the symptoms of that?
Well, a weak or let's say an atrophied left brain would be people who are more oppressed or oppress other people, bullies, you know, your murderers, you know, your average, you know.
So lizard brain is what you're talking about.
Well, what happens is when the left gets atrophied, it actually connects more to the reptile brain than the right does.
Okay.
It actually they actually conjoin more, and then the negativity is supported by the reptile system more than anything.
Okay,
See
interesting.
what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And
because
when-
you were describing like reptile.
But when the right side breaks down,
Uh-huh.
then the reptile brain actually is submissive and starts to lose power completely.
Okay.
And you start to see, again, a more slave mentality.
You don't
where
want
you
either of
put up
those.
with abuse
Yeah.
Yeah.
and you don't do anything about it. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
That's an atrophied right, and that's when the reptile brain doesn't work right either. It doesn't protect you.
Yeah.
It's not standing up for you.
Yeah.
Doesn't do what it should do for
Yeah.
you.
Either,
While
both of those, yeah.
when it's on the left brain, it's doing the opposite. It's doing too much.
Yeah.
Much, yeah.
Mhm.
You're going overboard.
Yep.
You're like oppressing other people, and you're pushing people around. And you're aggressive, and you're not rational. You know what I mean? Like most of your serial killers have a atrophied left.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
where that's just not functioning right.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's using the reptile as its source of power. So and you don't want that.
No.
You
That's
don't
very
want that.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to be in your fully function, both right and left, with a reptile in the rear. You know, reptile's only there for when it's fight or flight. you
Yeah.
know.
Mm-hmm.
Most everything else can be dealt with the your frontal brain,
Yeah, that makes
Definitely.
sense.
which is the child. That's the new part. It's only it's
Mhm.
a very new part. 350,000 years old.
Yeah.
We are 20,000 years old. We've had this I don't know. Yeah, it has not been that long.
Yeah.
Mhm.
In
Not
retrospect,
20,000.
yeah.
It's we're only like 300,000, 350,000. You're the Homo sapien, right? And then, but the frontal cortex was in Neanderthals and in Cro-Magnons, which was before that.
Mhm.
So I think it's 20 million years that the frontal lobe has been in existence or has started to form. But we were later as the Homo sapiens. You had Homo erectus, you had
Yep.
Neanderthal, you had Cro-Magnons.
Mhm.
I mean, a Cro-Magnon had a bigger brain than we did. So
It's true. Yeah.
maybe
'cause, I
those
mean,
were the
if,
firstborn.
If you look
Maybe.
at the structure of their skulls, it's definitely true. Also, in talking about that as well, we have skulls that we can find. They're very interesting. Like the suture line is all wrong. Instead of it going from side to side across the skull, it actually goes from front to top, which is
Those skulls, those dome skulls they found,
yeah.
and those are bigger than humans' capacity. So they weren't like pressed or shaped. They were just.
That's the thing. Yeah, exactly.
That
I mean,
size.
it's like think of the ancient Egyptians, with like the long
There
heads
you go.
supposedly.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
But look at the Raiders of the Lost
Oh, yeah.
Ark. Where does that end up? He ends up in South America with these aliens.
That's true.
Oh yeah.
I mean, because he starts you in
That
Raiders
was
of
a
the
weird
Lost Ark,
scene.
and he takes you to Hindu, right? He takes you to the Hindus, because that's a part of the storyline too. Ramayana, okay? All that connection's there.
Yep.
And then the Last Crusade is bringing you into the modern age, right?
Yep.
Right? And then the final one is where it all began.
The crystal skull.
Full circle. Full circle.
Dude.
Yeah.
Wow.
Full circle.
Didn't even think about that.
Because the Ark of the Covenant was the agreement between God and man. God and Abraham.
Yeah.
Abraham kicked so much butt on the battlefield that God said, you the man.
you the man.
As long as you, worship me, you'll be the man.
A lot of people write that one off. The Crystal Skull,
Yeah.
the Indiana Jones movie. A lot of people
Yeah.
they write that one off. They like to pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's very important
It is.
Yeah.
to the storyline.
Yeah.
Because he's telling you about the Anunnaki and the 13 bloodlines.
Mm-hmm.
The 13 bloodlines. If you want to learn another book, another guy to look up
Yeah.
is a guy named Fritz Springmeier. That's not his real name, it's a pseudonym.
Okay.
But Fritz Springmeier wrote a book called 13 Bloodlines, and he's
13
the first one to really blow it out.
Yeah, I've heard of
Yeah.
that book before. I knew I've heard Fritz Springmeier before. I was like, I've
Good
heard that
stuff.
book before.
That's good stuff. He was the first person to really connect the dots to the families. He actually identifies the 13 families, and they all go back to pre-Egyptian, back to, pre-Diluvian, before the flood. These families have been in charge for that long.
It's insane.
Wow.
Yeah, for 10,000 years. One of the family names is Kennedy. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. And you can see that they're doing battle. They're
Yeah.
battling each other even up on those tiers, those levels. They still fight it out.
Yep.
They have their differences. They're still fighting for control.
Yep.
So these different factions, different bloodlines, and we know really next to nothing. Like I said, the amount of knowledge that they have is just unbelievable. All we can do is just continue to try to pick up the pieces,
Mm-hmm.
pick up every stitch, as Donovan would say.
Baby step at a time.
You got to pick up
Yeah.
every stitch and pay attention. There's only really two currencies in the universe, and that's, what you pay attention to and spend time.
Mm.
Yeah, those are the
Spend
two currencies.
Spend time, yeah.
You pay attention and you spend time.
That's clever.
Yeah. Those are only the true currencies in
Yeah.
the world.
Yeah.
And the more you dedicate to those two concepts and whatever you're interested in, the more you're going to, develop it and learn it, be better at it,
Yeah.
and know more about it, and harness that knowledge to benefit you and yours. That's really what it's all about. And they've definitely got an upper hand.
Oh yeah, they have all the knowledge.
Feel thankful that you've got the world that you do have, because
Honestly.
Yeah.
people have fought pretty hard to get it to this.
It's true.
It's
we
true.
can be here. We can talk about pretty much whatever we want to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have any breaking in and shutting the whole thing down, pulling the
Exactly.
plugs,
Yeah.
saying, you can. Hey, there's
Not yet.
Not yet.
That's how it's been. It's been that
I
way in other
know.
countries.
Yeah.
That's why we have to really appreciate what we have here and not
Definitely.
lose it.
Yeah.
It's sad that people want to destroy it.
Yeah.
It's really sad.
It's brainwashing,
Yeah.
Completely
It's that
brainwashed.
self-loathing
Mhm.
concept again,
Mhm.
where
Yeah.
they hate themselves so much they hate their family, they hate their house, when
They hate
when
themselves.
you hate yourself and hate what you're gonna not take care of yourself, you're not gonna take care of your house,
Exactly.
you're gonna not take care of your community. Yeah, you don't
Well,
get
that's the
shit.
thing. There's you never really like anyone that hates themselves. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? They always do things that are bad, and you feel bad for them, sure, but you never. I mean,
Did you
it
like
never
Eeyore
clicks.
and Winnie the Pooh? I didn't like Eeyore. Every time he showed up, I was like,
Yeah.
oh,
Here
God.
we
Oh,
go.
I'm so sad. Winnie the
go
Pooh's like,
again.
"What are you doing, dude? Like, let's go. Here's some
Seriously.
honey. Like, what do you
Yeah.
want?
Like,
You know."
cheer
Come on.
up, dude.
Let's go.
Cheer up. Do
Just
something with
like-
yourself. I mean, it was just like, ooh.
To be fair, I think in one episode they stole his tail. So
Yeah, but still.
Yeah.
to be fair,
But again, those are
Man,
archetype characters, and that's
Yeah.
one of those people that are always just that way. And there's the self-loathers, people who just never want to be happy. They don't want to have a good life. They want to accept the servitude. Sadists and masochists is
Yeah.
what you got, right?
Mhm.
That's when you imbalance the left and brain. You have the sadist side, you have the masochist
that's
side.
interesting actually.
Yeah.
Wow, I
Yeah.
haven't thought about it that
I
way
didn't think
before.
Those
about
are
that either.
those are the negative sides
Yeah.
of that. When you turn someone into the bad part of that brain,
That's interesting.
you get the sadomasochist, which is the Luciferian concept, where you have a master and a slave all in one. You're both master and slave.
To yourself.
and to others.
Okay.
You're a slave to something else and a master over something.
Yeah, okay. That's
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Mm.
And they want to create that in our society.
Well, yeah, they do want people to have power trips like that. They're like, well, yeah, I got to listen to this guy, but I get to tell these guys
Yeah.
what to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
And these guys,
Very
those
much.
guys below you think exactly the same way. It just goes down the list.
Yep.
All right.
Pretty much it, guys.
Let's-
Great
well,
episode. Thank you very much for coming
Really
out.
glad to have
really
you.
excited.
Hope I can help.
Yes,
It's
thank
been good.
you.
Yeah.
We
Time
really
has flown.
appreciate that. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's gone really fast.
But hopefully this will help you guys. And
Yeah, we
get
appreciate
some-
you being
get some
here.
more
Thank you.
viewers.
Yeah, that was really
Thanks for your
awesome.
time.
Thank
Doing
you.
what you got. No problem.
By the
Good night,
way-
everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks
Bye.
for having me.
Thanks.
Thank you.